2022. This is a meeting of the Village of Mamaroneck Planning Board. We have quite a number of items on our agenda tonight, so we're just going to get right into it. So first we have our taking of attendance. So we have all members of the planning board here. We have Seamus O'Rourke, Cindy Goldstein, Ellen Styler, Richard Littman, and myself. We have Teresa Backner, our land use attorney. We have John Kellert, our consulting engineer. We have Alicia Moore and Elaine Dew from AKRF, our consulting planners. We have Susan Oakley, our consulting landscape architect. And we have Sean Jimison, our acting building inspector tonight. And Brittany O'Neill, our land use board secretary. Did I miss anybody? Trying to look at the Brady Bunch on the screen here and get everybody. Okay. All right. First up on the agenda, we have the minutes from our last meeting, which was June 22nd, 2022. Besides the fact that the resolution that got cut and pasted into the body of the minutes is all screwed up. Some sort of format problem. Did anybody have any comments on the actual body of the minutes? No comments? No comments? No comments? No comments? Okay, so we're going to request that the cutting and pasting job of the resolution for 415 Claflin get fixed before these get finalized. And then do I have a motion to accept the minutes as amended or revised or fixed or whatever?
So moved.
And I need a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. Seamus,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Ellen,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay.
May I just ask, I know that in the resolution that was attached to the minutes, item 10 was a reference to the tree preservation plan and the survival of the trees. Is that something, Teresa, we can use sort of as boilerplate moving forward, and that's always then going to be included in similar types of applications?
Yes, we can definitely do that. And I will attempt to remember to add it. I'm sure you'll remind me if I don't, but yeah, we will.
We have a lot of heads here. Somebody will figure it out. Thank you.
I usually see these things before you all do, so I'll try to remember. Okay, I just want to note for the minutes that Dennis Drogan, who is our also acting or assistant building inspector, but acting building inspector also has also with us tonight as well. Just joined us. Okay, we're going to move, if this is possible. Brittany, are the people here for 1065 Seven Oaks Lane?
Yes, Kristen is on.
Okay, let's just do this because this is going to be relatively fast, I think. We have a request before us for an extension for the site plan and the wetlands permit for 1065 Seven Oaks Lane. This is becoming a fairly common experience for us, common occurrence because of everything going on with the market and I'm guessing financing and the supply chain. People aren't able to get their projects going in a timely fashion as we would hope, as they probably hope more than us. So we have a request to extend the time until a year from the, let's see, it was supposed to expire on July 22nd, 2022, and they are asking for an extension to July 22nd, 2023. Ms. Motel, did I just see you here? Oh, there you are. Do you have anything to add to that?
I do. Good evening, Chairwoman, members of the Planning Board, Kristen Motel with Cuddy and Fader for Gary and Lisa Matthews. They are the owners of the property and they were the recipients of wetlands and site plan approvals from the Planning Board several years ago in 2020. They've been diligently pursuing construction. Actually, construction of their home is almost complete. But the site plan and wetlands approvals do have a condition that construction must be completed within 2.5 years of issuance of those approvals. They are on the cusp, but to be conservative here, we are asking for an additional year extension. And
Okay,
I believe, Brittany, Lisa Matthews may be on here if the board has any questions on her progress with the home and the improvements.
She is. You want me to promote her?
If there's questions.
yeah, okay. Does anybody have any questions? I know I don't. It's tough out there. We know that. Nobody? Okay, Teresa, is this just a voice vote to approve the, you're on mute.
All right. If someone would just like to make a motion to extend the approvals for an additional year until July 22nd, 2023, without any other changes to the resolution, subject to all the same conditions.
Okay, would anybody like to make that motion as just stated?
So moved, as long as I don't have to remember the whole thing and restate it myself.
Is 1 year what we would always do? I mean, if it's close, is there any reason to do less just for neighbors getting things done? Or do you think 1 year is that typical?
It's typical to do 1 year, and it's
Okay.
also easier if we keep it the same, you know.
And in that case, I will second it.
Okay, okay, let's see, let's vote. Richard,
Yes.
Ellen,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Seamus,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, all right. Brings us to our first new application for the evening. We have an application at 1037 Orienta Avenue, a proposal to demolish the home that's on the site now and to construct a new 2.5-story single-family residence, which is somewhat larger, which of course you would expect in these days. So why don't we promote who's going to speak on behalf of the applicant and let them present the application to us. And then we have comments from our consulting planner, our consulting engineer, our consulting landscape architect.
Diane, is Steve going to speak as well? Marsh?
If there are questions, but I would promote him in case.
Okay.
We're good?
Yep, we're all set.
Okay, super. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Diane Eaton from Keller Eaton Architects. I'm here representing Lindsay and Nick Gorovich on their project at 1037 Orienta Avenue. I have other consultants here, Dan Sherman, landscape architect. I believe it's Michael Stein, although I don't see his, yes, there he is. Michael Stein from Hudson Engineering, civil engineer. I will just kind of walk you through the whole project, including some of their sheets. If it's okay, I'll just share my screen. And if you have any specific questions, you know, Michael and Dan can certainly answer any on those sheets themselves. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so this is the first sheet, our CS1 sheet, and I just kind of zoomed in on the site plan, and hopefully that's at a good scale that everyone can see. What we have here, this right here is Orienta Avenue. And this dashed line here is the existing line of house, which is really situated, you know, well into the rear yard. It's not really in a great location at all. So that was like our first point, that we knew we would want to have the house closer to the street.
Is Eden, I don't want to interrupt you, but you're fading in and out. Your microphone gets louder and soft, and I don't know if it's, is anybody else hearing that?
Yes.
Okay.
Same problem.
Get a little closer to the microphone or
I'll
something.
get a little closer to the microphone. I can also switch my microphone if this is not a good microphone.
That right there is very good.
This is good? Okay, super. I'll start over. So on this side is Orienta Avenue. And the dashed line is the existing footprint of the house that we are taking down. It sits well far into the rear yard. So our goals were to move the house forward, whereas more in keeping, you know, with standard positioning of homes. Some of the other factors that came into play were the fact that we wanted to keep certain of the big trees along the street side, which were rather large. We also wanted to have a driveway with an ability to turn around so we can pull forward onto Orienta, because it's a rather busy road and visibility is a little tough right there at the entryway. We also like the idea of extending a sidewalk to the existing, a front walk to the sidewalk, so we were more connected to the community. So that kind of just explains a little bit about how we arrived at where our house sits. As one of the consultants pointed out, there is a travel way along the northerly side of the property. We've moved our driveway completely off that travel way. And just to briefly talk about that, because it was brought up in one of the consultants' full memo. This is a travel way that's at 6 feet on our property and 6 feet on the adjacent properties, more or less. This was put in place decades ago when Bayhead was not built. So there were some landlocked homes, and that was the reason for it. But since Bayhead was created, no property is currently landlocked. And right now it is not a public easement or travel way. And my client is in discussions with the neighbors that are impacted just to see exactly, what can be done. Our goal would be to remove the gravel because it's rather unsightly and it's really what we find obsolete, and in terms of its functionality, but that's to be determined with the adjacent neighbors. The house is fully complying with all zoning regulations. So I think I'll just kind of start going through the rest of the documents. Sorry, I have a little bit of a scratchy throat. We have now the consultant drawings from Michael Stein. So there are a number of trees that we do have to take down just based on where the house is currently situated. A number of them are, really right on top of this home. So to take it down, we do have to take down some of the trees. We were trying to be very mindful of keeping as many as possible. And this is what we arrived at. Going further along, this is, the beginning of the surface water and mitigation plans. We have silt fencing wrapping around, tree protection details. The dry well system that we have is situated in the front yard here. And Michael can speak, at greater length on that. Again, more details in terms of that Coltech system and more details. Moving on to Dan Sherman's landscape plan, again, pointing out some of the trees that we're saving, infilling around the perimeter where we did kind of prune out some, invasive species like burning bushes, trees that are dying. There were a number of trees that are not in great shape. While including, some screening, some boxwood screening around parking areas, nice plantings around walks, screening around condenser units, etc. Again, Dan will be able to talk you through that with much more grace than I just did. These are just additional documentations of things that Dan had provided in case you need to refer to them, plant list, etc. Moving on to the floor plans. It's an L-shaped home. The garage situates, forward of the property. There's a drive court here. Then walking in, it's pretty, common layout where foyer, family room, kitchen towards the back of the house, dining room off to the side, mud and service spaces connecting the kitchen to the garage, and study and some other private, smaller living spaces off to the north side. We have the children bedroom, over to one side, the master suite on the other. This is on the second floor. And over the garage, we have a study in this day of everybody working from home, and another guest bedroom for long-term guests. Basement is also fairly typical with recreation room, gym, and the guest bedroom. These are the elevations. Just to give you a sense of what the house looks like. I'm trying to keep the house in scale and nothing too large in any one direction. And those are photos, so I think you all have seen the property. And I think that pretty much covers it.
Anyone else from your team want to go through any more detail at this point in time? Since this is sort of a preliminary overview.
Good evening, Michael Stein with Hudson Engineering. Just very briefly that, we have received the comments from Keller Sessions Office, relatively minor things. We've already gone through and addressed most of them. So we'll definitely have the submission in for the next meeting.
Okay.
Dan, maybe you'd like to comment. I'm sorry. Dan, would you like to comment on yours?
Yeah. If, Diane, can you bring my page back up?
Yep.
So we did a planting plan and we're removing a number of trees. It's probably at the top. There's about a dozen trees, and I've replaced them with new trees of the very same species. So there's white pine and there's sugar maple and cherries that were on the property. But I am also in receipt of the Carabella land design review, and it pointed out that we should try for more native species as well. And I think that falls mostly in the shrub category, because in our trees, I have sugar maple, river birch, American dogwood, white pine for the trees, and a couple cherries. I don't think lilac is native, but the shrubs I did not draw from a native list, and I can work on that. I have Andromeda because the deer resistant boxwoods lends itself. It's deer resistant, but also works with the style of the house. The Emerald euonymus is a ground cover that's seasonal and evergreen and attractive, but these are not native things. So that's my next step, to review it and as best I can get things that still serve the purpose of making an attractive home for the homeowners, and are deer resistant and serve the purpose, but are native. I'm aware of what kinds of things would do that, but we just got this memo, so I haven't done it, but I will.
Okay.
I don't think I 100%, but I bet I can get up to 80% native, I think.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, I think that gives us an overview of the project. And as you've mentioned, as the consultants to the planning board, we do get a jump on things. We kind of fast track, we start the review before the first meeting. So we do have some comments already to give you. And from AKRF to go over some of the things that they pointed out to us. I think, Alicia, are you going to do that tonight?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
So our concerns were really, the main one was about the easement, just clarifying those issues about what's going to happen to that gravel driveway. Another issue was just about the calculations of the impervious surface area, and that's not really I don't want to get too far into the technicality there, but I just wanted to bring up that the gravel driveway was counted towards the existing impervious surface area. And that the site plan, if that could just include the floodplain and the hazard areas. Also sign the EAF. And those were our main concerns. And of course, recommending that this is a type 2 action under SECRA.
I tend to go, and I think it was from one of my last hearings, I went to the DEC and that like automatically filled in that, as you pointed out. So I did go onto FEMA and printed out a format, and we are not in any flood zone. So I'll provide that documentation in our submittal. And yes, I will sign it.
We're losing you. We're losing you again.
Sorry. Michael, could you comment on the gravel potentially? Her question about the gravel being part of impervious.
As far as our calculations go, we're treating that as impervious, just because it's just basically our standard practice, and I know working with college sessions, that's typically what they're looking for. More than that, I mean, as far as lot coverage, typically we wouldn't count that as impervious.
Okay.
All right, so we just have to make sure if that's not impervious, then it's not calculated in the current inventory of impervious, and then, versus as proposed, because we know there's an increase, a significant increase in impervious surface with the size.
We'll take a look and we'll review and just make sure it gets clarified.
Yeah, make sure it's fixed, yeah. Okay. Thank you, Alicia. John from Keller Sessions, you want to go over what your initial comments were? The
Sure.
application?
Good evening. Review of the site plan. The applicant's proposing to mitigate the stormwater through infiltration devices in the front yard. The important part of their design is that all discharge from impervious surfaces will be detained within those units, and it will all be infiltrated into the ground up to the 25-year storm. Why that's important is there's no drainage on Orienta Avenue. So we won't have any discharge to the 25-year storm. I noticed that the house will have a full basement, and I assume a sump pump.
Correct.
For the footing drains, which have to discharge somewhere. We ask that you show that discharge location, and if we can mitigate that flow so we don't have discharge directly to the road or neighbors' properties from the sump pump. I think we've handled other projects in the village with Mike Stein's office, where they've discharged the sump pump to an infiltration unit in the yard, and so that we don't have a point discharge. We also ask if there's a stormwater management system detail on the detail sheet. It would be helpful if you could add more detail to that detail, such as inverts, bottom and top of unit, 25-year high water elevation. It would just make it easier for us in reviewing the calculations, to confirm that the inverts and the high water elevations are all working properly. I believe there was some grading shown on the plan, but there appeared to be some grading that may be missing, because I believe the grade in the back right-hand side of the property is slightly higher than the first floor. So I assume there's going to be some grading, probably because the site is so flat. You just couldn't pick it up with the contours, so maybe some spot elevations. And a cut fill analysis, so we know exactly how many yards of material will be coming in or off site. I assume it'll be going off site, and I assume it won't be that much volume because there doesn't appear to be significant cuts or fills on the property. We requested that the applicant show the existing utility locations and whether we're going to be installing new utilities to the village infrastructure in the street, or whether we're going to use the existing service lines. It would be helpful if we had dimensions on the driveway to motor court and the parking spaces. On the erosion and sediment control plan, if the temporary stockpiles, if we can quantify the amount of volume we really need to store on the site, confirm that we have the stockpiles shown are of adequate size. If we could also show the equipment staging area on the erosion and sediment control plan. If the construction details can be expanded to include all improvements, curbing, pavements, walkways. Obviously, a curb cut will be required with the village. We requested that the details, the village details off the village site be included on the plan for the contractor to fully understand for restoration of pavement if we're in the road with new utility services. If we have to replace the granite curb or connect with the saddle to the existing sewer system. Also, the plan showed a decorative treatment for the driveway, which was in the right-of-way itself. You may want to check with the highway superintendent whether they would prefer that decorative treatment to be on the private property rather than the village right-of-way. It's definitely their call, but it's an issue you may want to check with them early on. The trench drain detail should be shown. I believe you have a trench drain in the driveway and it should have a sump. Tree protection detail should be included on the plan, and the delineation on the layout plan or the erosion sediment control plan, that's where it is, should be extended out to the drip line of the trees. And my only other question was on the travel way also. Mrs. Eaton had addressed that already.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll hear from our landscape architect consultant, Susan Oakley. We do have, hopefully we'll catch up to this soon, okay? The new tree law, which is now encoded as chapter 318 of the Village Code, which is available online, requires the applicants to submit a tree preservation plan, which has to be included in the determination letters that are sent out from the building inspector. So hopefully we'll get that together and get that out. But you know, that's one piece of documentation that's missing that you're going to have to fill in. And it's fairly self-explanatory if you go to the code under the section of site plan and planning board, as opposed to building inspector and building department, and no site plan. You go to the site plan and planning board section, and it's fairly clear what's needed. That said, where's Susan? Do you want to walk us through your concerns with regards to the trees and the other landscape design features?
Sure. You brought up the most important point, I think, and that's the tree preservation plan. And I gave the general definition in my memo, but as you mentioned, there is more detailed information online. So that includes most of the information needed. It should also include the village's tree protection standard, which I also included with the memo. And Mr. Sherman touched upon adding as many native species or changing the species to as many native plants as possible. And that would be appreciated. Also, he also gave an assessment of the existing trees on the property, which is very helpful. It's too bad that's not part of the tree plan, but the fact that you included it was very helpful in determining how you decided what was okay to remove. And that's about it. It's still in the preliminary stages. So once we see the tree preservation plan, we'll have a lot more information.
And just to give you a heads up, Mr. Sherman, trees over a certain size, if they're removed, need to be replaced. And if they're larger, they need to be replaced by more than one tree, and so on and so forth. And that's all spelled out in the law.
Right. And one other point, when I made a site visit, this is like many of the surrounding properties, it's pretty wooded. And so a lot of the trees are directly on the perimeter of the property, but not on the property. So I mentioned in the memo about protecting the tree roots of neighboring properties also. So I think because of the close proximity of these neighboring trees to the property line, they should also be included on the tree preservation plan, so we know exactly where the tree roots are that need to be
Protected.
Yeah, protected. So we should save what we have, unlike what happened at 1010.
Okay, thank you. We can remove the drawings from the screen now, and I'm going to turn to the planning board members for any comments, questions, in addition to those that our esteemed consultants have come up with. So,
Kathy, before we leave John and Susan's comments, I just wanted to make an observation. A lot of times the landscape architect will make a change to satisfy a comment by Susan, and it will require more comments from John in the stormwater category. And I just want to say, anything you can do to coordinate that amongst yourselves will just make everything easier for everybody and sort of end multiple comment letters. So that's just a suggestion on my part.
right. Not only the details on the plan, but if you are required to plant more trees to replace the ones you're taking down than you have in the plan right now, it's going to impact your stormwater management plans. So just so you're aware of that. Okay. All right, can we get to a view where we see the gallery instead of the screen, please? And
Oh, here we go.
we will, this is there, thank you very much. This is a single family home. We'll type it for secret. But before we do that, does any member of the planning board have any other comments, questions, anything for the applicant, so that they have an idea, a full idea of where we stand right now, things they have to respond to, or any questions that we have.
Well, I have a question on the planning board application on the third page, section 2 coastal assessment form. Items 5 and 6 were checked yes, and I don't know why, because I'm not sure that this site is adjacent, located in, or contiguous to, or have a significant effect on any critical environmental areas, nor do I think it's anywhere near sites of historic, archaeological, or cultural significance. But I think, Ms. Eaton, I don't know.
Also filled in automatically by this DEC mapper. You're talking about the on the EAF form?
Yeah, items 5 and 6 under section 2 coastal assessment form. I don't know. Yeah, Seamus, you're on HCZMC more recently.
You asked the exact same question I was going to. If you look at that detailed mapper, Long Island Sound which is a critical, that's what's popping up. And I think we all can assess the proximity of this lot to Long Island Sound, I think. But I don't know why the archaeological sites came up. Yes, but that also is in the EAF mapper. That's the last page of the EAF. So it would be nice to understand why that's being flagged, especially if there's a demolition here, which I doubt is relevant, but I wonder why it's yes.
Computers, sometimes, is it the old saying, garbage in, garbage out? Somebody did a program for something. So.
And then, the only other thing I have is trees. I think the planning board echoes Ms. Oakley's commentary that, it'll be important to protect the tree roots on trees that are on the property lines, or even a little bit in on the neighbors' properties. We can't go, as was pointed out, we can't have another situation like across the street. If any effort can be made to keep even a few of the trees that are looking, like they're going to be removed on this, because frankly, losing a large sugar maple or something else, so you put in 2 smaller ones, you've really lost the canopy for the next 15, 20 years. So we would just, I think, urge you to preserve the mature trees, not the shrubs. I don't think we're so interested in the euonymus and the ilex and that we're looking for habitat, we're looking for cultivars, we're looking for maintaining that very woodsy field in a village that is losing trees all the time.
We're trying to improve and increase the canopy in the village of Mamaroneck, as are many of the villages around here. We're reviewing a comprehensive plan at this point in time, and I saw some data in our review recently. We're talking about it later tonight, that we had a 46% canopy cover, which no longer exists. That's an old number, and our goal was to get to 50. We unfortunately have lost many mature trees in the neighborhood that we're talking about right now. As Cindy mentioned, just across the street, they took down 60 something, I don't remember the number. So we're trying to increase the canopy, and any large tree that can be saved, even if it means making something else smaller, carport, open the lawn, which has no ecological value whatsoever. Something we urge you to look at it, and that's something that we're going to look at too. If you've got to plant more trees to replace the ones you're taking down, we'll be looking for where they are, where you're putting them, and how you're putting them, and making sure they survive. So I think that's something to pay a lot of attention to. Anybody have anything else they want to add to this before we type for secret? And I think you guys have to go to HCZM. No, you don't. Just BAR. So it's just us. Okay. So you don't have anywhere else to go. You can just go off and do the work. And anybody have any other issues they want to raise before we take care of secret and send the team on their way? Yes, no, I don't see anybody. Okay. Teresa or Alicia, do you want to say anything about secret? This is a single family home. It's pretty, Alicia. Yeah.
Sorry. No, just that we're recommending that's type 2.
Yeah, single family home. Okay, so I need a motion then to type this application for secret as a type 2.
So moved.
Need a second?
Second.
Richard, second. Okay. Ellen? Ellen? She looks frozen. Okay, let's skip her for a minute. Ellen, are you there? No.
Yes, I'm here now. So
You froze for a minute.
I was frozen.
Yes. All right. Your vote on the motion to type it as type 2 for secret?
Yes.
Seamus?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay, we're done. I think it's pretty comprehensive. I hope no new issue shows up, but it depends on, obviously, on the next submissions that we see for our review from you guys. Okay. All right, great. All right, do you have any questions for us? Everybody clear?
I know sometimes you tell us which next hearing we could go to, but I think we'll be able to pull this all together by the next hearing. Is that?
Depends on when you can. We have no meetings in August.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so you'd have to get your material in for the last meeting, which is the 27th of July, pretty quickly, or the second week of September. So it gives you.
Technically, the cutoff is today for that, unless you were willing to extend it, Kathy, for the 27th.
Well, I think they have a lot of work to do, so I'm not sure. Even if we extend it, we only extend it till Friday. So
Yeah.
lose you an extra 2 days. We need time for everyone to review everything before the meeting.
Right.
Okay, so
I guess so. The extension would only be to Friday, as you're saying.
it would only be till Friday. Yeah.
So that doesn't.
Willing to do that if you think you can. Today's Wednesday night, so you have Thursday and Friday. Right. If not, then you
Okay,
you
I'll
have.
consult if that's okay. Can I consult with my other people here? I mean, it seems a little tight to me. Or do we have to say?
You can do it off camera because
That's 2 weeks away.
come up with, if it doesn't come in, if it comes in great, if it doesn't come in great, but we'll know on Friday. Okay, so you can take that offline.
Fair enough.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Okay, this brings us to the second new application for a preliminary site plan review at 900 Westmore Avenue, which is the Beach Point Country Club. Before we get into this, I believe Cindy has something she needs to say. And so we'll let her say it.
Yes. I submitted a memo to the planning board and also to the board of trustees. I'm certainly going to recuse from this application since my husband and I are members of Beach Point Club. Brittany, if you need copies of those two memos, one was requesting an advisory opinion from the Board of Ethics, exactly how they wanted the recusal form to happen, but that was 2 months ago and I heard nothing. So I'm going to recuse as publicly as I can. So I will turn off my camera. I won't leave the meeting, Teresa, unless you tell me I have to, but I will be muted and not participating. Is that okay? Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah, this isn't gonna be long. Sorry. I took the opportunity to get some cold to drink. Okay. So we need to promote the team from Beach Point. I see Michael's still with us. You all involved with Beach Point also? Okay, we have an application before us to demolish the existing tennis pro shop and parking lot that's near the tennis courts, I guess, in the tennis pro shop, and construct a new pro shop, a viewing pavilion, and a new parking lot. I think that sums it up. Am I missing anything? Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm sorry, my husband just poured me some more water. So we're going to go through the same process we just went through with the last application. We're going to start with the applicant and have them present the project to us. And then our consultants will chime in on any comments they have so far. And then the planning board will get to speak. Okay. Who is here?
Excellent. My name is Kathleen Gallagher. I am with Insight Engineering, Surveying, and Landscape Architecture. I am also joined tonight by the applicant, Randy Reuter of Beach Point Club. I will share my screen.
Does Randy need to be promoted?
I just did.
Okay. Hi, Randy.
The proposed project at Beach Point Club consists of the demolition of an existing tennis pro shop building, the construction of a new tennis pro building, and a viewing pavilion that are within the same general area as the previous, the reconfiguration of the existing parking lot, and associated utilities, including upgrading stormwater management practices. To orient ourselves to the drawings, north is on the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. Beach Point Club is located at 900 Rushmore Avenue in the Marine Recreation Zone. The club owns two parcels. One of the parcels is located to the east across from Rushmore Avenue, which is where the main clubhouse is located. And the second parcel is located to the west, which is the parcel shown on the plans. This 5.4 acre parcel is flanked on four sides by streets, including Rushmore Avenue, Bloomdale Avenue, Walton Avenue, and Bleecker Avenue. The lot consists of several recreation courts. You can see the tennis courts that are located on the bottom of the screen, as well as supporting buildings, including the tennis pro shop, which is the subject of the application, and that is located in this area. And then the existing parking lot to be removed is this large hatched area in the middle of the screen. It should be noted that the eastern portion of the lot is in the AE 12 floodplain, and you can see that dividing line right here. So we are in a floodplain on this portion of the site, and then it transitions into a hatched zone X and the unhatched zone X. As previously mentioned, the project includes the demolition of the existing pro shop, And if we move on to the layout and landscaping plan, the construction of a new one-story tennis pro shop and a viewing pavilion that are in generally the same area as the previous building. The project includes updating the hardscape that is located around the proposed building, as well as the landscaping in the same general area and the addition of several light poles along the edge of the parking lot. The landscaping for the project does include the reuse of hydrangeas that are on site that are in pretty good condition. And so we are proposing to reuse 25 of those hydrangeas on site. The existing parking lot that is proposed to be removed is currently around 27 spaces. And the increase, we're able to increase the total parking lot to 49 spaces. We were able to do this with only a slight increase to the overall footprint of the site and just making the layout a little more efficient. We were able to substantially increase the total parking on site. The existing parking lot, I'm going to jump back to the existing conditions very quickly, consists of parking that is located along the edge of the lot, and then a bay of angled parking spaces located in the center. You can see that the parking lot is a little oddly configured. It's not very efficient. And so that was one of the main goals of the reconfiguration of the lot. The existing traffic pattern includes a one-way entrance from Westmore Avenue and then includes a one-way exit onto Bloomdale Avenue. The intent of the proposed parking lot is to keep the existing traffic pattern as it already is because it is accepted and is a routine by the existing club members, and it works most efficiently during their high traffic times. The parking lot serves as the location for recreation on site. That doesn't put a huge demand though on the existing parking lot. But the lot also supports the day camp that occurs within some of the other buildings on site. And that activity has an increase of traffic during drop off and pickup throughout the day. So one of the reasons that we have kept the traffic pattern as both one way in, one way on the drive aisles, and a one-way exit is to make that pickup and drop off more efficient for the club members. One, because it's the way that they already use the lot. And two, we think it continues to be efficient as compared to allowing one availability for them to move around and kind of get stuck in that traffic pattern as they're dropping off and picking up their children. We also believe that it just keeps those peak times a little more safe. Jumping to our utilities plans, the proposed disturbance on site is 0.9 acres. So we are under 1 acre of disturbance. That means the stormwater management practices were designed in accordance with the town code, which mimics the state code. So the project is a redevelopment with an increase in impervious surface. Treatment includes 2 pervious asphalt pavement sections within the parking lot, and then a third location of an underground infiltration system. Water and sewer service is going to connect in, going to be rerouted, but connect into existing conditions that we already have and existing connections that we already have on site. And that concludes the main technical portion of our presentation. I'm happy to take any questions from the board or the consultants, as well as hear the consultants' comments.
So do you have any other presentations to do for tonight, or this was everything that sums everything up?
We do not have the architect with us tonight, but I do have their floor plans and elevations. I guess the most illustrative is this elevation, which shows the proposed tennis pro building and then propose the pavilion. So the pavilion is open air on the sides, but it is covered with a roof. Obviously, if we're watching tennis in the sun, we want to provide shaded areas for them in this space.
Okay. Okay. So we can then pivot to Alicia from AKRF.
Hi. All right, so for this one, as a fundamental thing on the site plan, it would be helpful to add a zoning analysis table that just compares the proposed dimensions and other technical specs to the requirements that's already in the zoning code.
I do have one question. If you could just talk, a little more about what past the requirements we already have on the table. It doesn't have to be tonight. We can talk offline, but I just do need a little more clarification on the additional categories that you want to see on that table.
Okay, sure. I will take a look at that and send over any comments. Which sheet is this on? I'm sorry, I can't see that.
SP1.
All right, thank you. That may be sufficient. I just want to take a second look.
Perfect.
So yes, we see that you also noted that there would be there's another application coming before the board for the marina, and just given that that's sufficiently distinct, the applications don't need to be combined. And the parking lot, which is great, it would increase efficiency and safety, and I guess that's nearly double the number of parking spaces. And given the location of the site, the application will need to be referred to the HCZMC. And it also requires approval by the Board of Architectural Review. And as you mentioned, it's in the AE flood zone, and so it will have to comply with the additional requirements of Chapter 186 in the code. And then finally, this also, we're recommending that it's a type 2 action under SECRA.
Mhm. And that's because of the size, correct?
Right. It's number 9. Yeah, what the exact threshold is, so I'm not going to guess, but yes, it's because of the size.
Because it's smaller.
It's 4,000 square feet, I believe, is the,
With the cutoff.
yeah, I believe so. I noticed on the list of approvals needed, it didn't say a flood zone permit. That was the 6/7/22 determination. Alicia, should that be added?
I think that's done by the flood, the building department, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they do that internally. We haven't
Yeah.
added them, but we can start to if you wanted to.
Right, that's done by the building department.
Okay, no problem. I just want to make sure
They're
it's missed.
They're the flood czars.
We also filled out a preliminary floodplain permit application when we went to the building department for their original determination.
Okay. That might help us to see that. So maybe Brittany can get a hold of that off of the notice and disseminate it to the planning board members and the.
Yeah, I can get a copy.
Thanks. Okay. Okay. We don't have comments from any other consultants. I don't know if John, if you have, is there no review from the consulting engineer because of the size of the project?
No, I submitted a review.
Oh. Must have missed it. I'm sorry. Why don't you walk us through it then?
Sure.
Enlighten me. I'm not home, so I'm kind of like in a mess here.
Okay. As Mrs. Gallagher had mentioned, that they're mitigating the stormwater through the infiltrators proposed on the, I guess it's the northeast side of the property, and using porous pavement. We're reviewing the calculations. I had some initial comments, which I've provided. Many of my comments are just typical housekeeping in the village, notes and, documenting certain issues with the erosion and sediment control plan, such as the concrete washout areas and the required items that need to be submitted. The more important items, the first one is the floodplain. It appears that there is fill being placed within the floodplain. And the applicant will need to demonstrate that compensatory storage is being provided to compensate for that fill. so that it ends up as a zero net increase of fill on the property. So we maintain the present volume at a minimum. The other item that concerned me, there was a discharge proposed from the stormwater system. That's a point discharge into the lawn area adjacent to Rushmore Avenue. You know, you're adding discharge directly to that area. I know there is a drainage system on the northern end of the property. I know it's a bit of a distance. It would be nice to extend that drain directly into the drainage system on the north so that we don't have accumulation of water in that area.
It's something we can look at. There are a lot of trees in this area.
Yeah, I see that. Could we, or possibly take a look at what it might take just to detain the complete or infiltrate the complete runoff? Possibly a few more infiltrators will eliminate any discharge at all.
That's something we can
You
look
can
at.
take a look at that, and if you'd like to call me, we can talk about it.
Great.
That'd be great. On the plan I received, I noticed on the plan you're presenting tonight, you have dimensions on the parking lot. I believe the plans were submitted to us did not have the dimensions, so I didn't know how wide the spaces were or the drive aisles. It appears this plan does have it. And obviously I had a concern with the two one-way flows, but now that you explain the daycare and the drop off of the children, I can understand why you're looking to maintain that same flow in one direction. Obviously, we'll need to you'll need to show any signage in the parking lot. I wasn't sure if the existing parking lot was being maintained, you were just adding to it and topping it, or you were going to remove it and repave it. I just wasn't clear on the plan. It doesn't matter to me one way or the other. It's just, if you could just clarify that on the plan. Any stockpile locations, concrete washout, as I mentioned before, some standard notes. And obviously you would need a street opening permit from the village DPW for the connection to the, I guess on the south side, you're connecting to the existing drainage system. But other than that, it's a clear plan, easy to understand, and I'm sure it'll work if we can address these few issues.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to our landscape architect. Susan, I don't know if there was a memo because I obviously missed something in my transition here. So,
There was a memo. Again, a tree preservation plan is needed. That includes the tree protection standard that I included in the memo. As many people have mentioned, the site's due to the site's proximity to Long Island Sound and the location in a floodplain, I'm requesting that all proposed plant material be native and flood tolerant. And they're only proposing the removal of 3 evergreen trees and a deciduous tree and an arborvitae shrub as of now. So once the tree preservation plan is put together and we know that the required replacements for the size of these trees has been addressed, which can also be found in the new tree law. There's a chart that indicates the replacement based on the trees that are being removed. Then it can be assessed as a whole.
and arborvitaes are not trees.
am hesitant to call them a tree, but some are so big, they
They
look
don't meet the definition of a tree, which is a
Right.
single trunk, branches, right?
but they've marked that.
We looked this
So
up
I mention it.
for another project.
Just one quick question. I haven't had a chance to really go through that. If our landscape architect has any questions just on the nuances, is it okay if they reach out to you directly just to ask some minor questions?
Absolutely. And if you want to run the plan by me before submitting it, that always can save some steps.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that.
Sure.
Okay, let's go then to the gallery. And we can stop the screen sharing so that we can see the members of the planning board. And as noted, we have 4 of us working on this project. So we have to make sure we don't have time. Anybody have any comments, questions, concerns to bring up to the applicant now? They will go to HCZM next and work on some of our issues, but they probably won't be back to us until they're finished with HCZM. That's usually the way it works, because the project may change a little bit based on their review. So anybody have any additional what we've already heard?
Yeah, I have a kind of a line of thinking just to ask a little bit about. So I think that the AKRF memo notes, and correct me on this language, that because the other work that this club might do is on a different tax lot, that it can be treated separately, but it wasn't clear to me whether it had to be or even should be. And so maybe I would start with a question to John Kellard, which is, this is very close to the 1 acre threshold. And, I think that paramount to the village of Mamaroneck, particularly in a location like this, floodplain, right on critical environmental area of Long Island Sound, and, an important location, that if, a club is in control and doing a bunch of work and goes over an acre at one time, perhaps they should be taking that next step for either water quality or quantity. So maybe my question would be, how different would the threshold be if the applicant was to design as if it was a 1 acre disturbance?
The key difference is that they would have to design for a 100-year storm instead of a 25-year storm for the quantity. The water quality would be the same. It's really the quantity volume. Trigger it to a 100-year. They would also have to file an NOI with New York State DEC. It's not a significant process. We would approve it. It's basically a filing with DEC. I think the major issue is changing the design from a 25-year to a 100-year.
Yeah, I mean, from where I'm sitting, I'm sure there's an expense that goes with that. I don't know if it's reasonable or not. I mean, it'd be great to see this site designed for a 100-year storm. But that's.
The site is obviously, I mean, we're in a small area, and obviously you're all very aware that we're constrained by water tables and things of that nature. So to be able to treat the increase of volume is definitely an ask from the applicant. I am not, Insight is not the designers of the adjacent project. I believe Dan Natchez and Associates, their offices. But my understanding from that project is that there's very, very minor work in the land, and that disturbance is very minimal. So it's not like we're at that 0.99 acre line. I do believe that their land disturbance is pretty minimal for the additional project.
Okay, I think my comment would be, and the various things will guide this through to wherever it ends up. But my comment would be, I think that we are increasing impervious on this site. It's a floodplain as of right now. I think there's net fill. We'll see if we end up with that. So, those are things that at least I consider, whether the, whether the 25-year storm versus 100-year storm type retention is appropriate. But, ultimately, I think hopefully it's going to be clear what's required. But, being very close to the acre, which is just an arbitrary line and in an important part of the village like this, I think it'd be great to see the applicant do as much as they could, on that front.
I was gonna say for
Just to clarify, because we're talking about the other project that we were made aware of, it's not coming to the planning board. It's a project to make the marina entrance ADA compliant. It requires a marine permit, I believe, from HCZM. So just for the people who are watching this and the people interested in it, just to clarify what that is. And Teresa, did you want to make a comment on the fact that it was determined by the staff that there would be two separate applications?
Yeah, I think it would go a ways to answering Seamus's question, though, if Ms. Gallagher could provide the total area of disturbance for the other project. And then if it's still under an acre, by all means, you can certainly provide more stormwater, but at least it would be nice to have that fact in the record.
We understand it's not your firm, but obviously the manager of
We can coordinate.
knows the details, so you'll be able to get it. Okay. Anybody else in the planning board and have any other comments, questions?
Kathy, can I ask one more question?
You can ask whatever
you Mrs. Gallagher, you mentioned additional light. How does it show how high they are and what intensity they are?
I realize I am not showing my screen at the moment, but can do so again if we feel like that is appropriate. We are proposing to have light poles that total height is going to be, I will give you the actual light height instead of, that's our detail where we go through the post heights. The mounting height is going to be 14.6, so it's not intended to be your stereotypical 18-foot light poles. They are pole mounted lights as compared to like the shoebox style lights that you would consider to have in a parking lot. We did want to take some additional aesthetics into consideration just because of the nature of the club, something that's a little more higher end, but keep it as low as physically possible while still providing safety to anybody that happens to be there at the end of the night in the summer or happens to be there in the winter for any reason, just to make sure that we're providing some sort of safety on those perimeter areas.
So it's perimeter lighting. The tennis court's going to be lit?
No.
Okay, so no night tennis.
And these are downward facing lights. So although you can see it's kind of this lantern style, it's really sitting housed up above in the cap so that it's downward facing and not providing any sort of light spillage or pollution onto adjacent neighbor properties.
Okay. Great, good catch, Teresa. Anybody else? If not, that'll wrap this up tonight. And we will see you, I guess, when we finish with HCZM. Correct? I think so. Okay. Thank you.
You would like to type it and send it on to HCZM?
Oh, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you very much. You need to type it before you go to HCZM. Okay.
I do actually have one procedural question as we talk about going to HCZM. You guys have mentioned that you don't have an August meeting, which means the next submission, both HCZM and the planning board don't have an August meeting. So that means the HCZM submission is August 30th. 31st, I believe. And the planning board would be the 24th. Kathy, Chairman, you had said that you wanted us to completely finish HCZM before we came back to the planning board. I think the
That's
ask
normally
is there any way that we
Yeah.
can parallel process it? Since it does seem like we have some comments about stormwater and things like that that we need to
Yeah.
work out.
We've found over time, and when I say time, years, that often HCZM works with the applicant and the project might shift or change slightly. And so for us to be reviewing a plan that's about to change or may change, we usually don't, until consistency, the LWRP and everything's wrapped up with HCZM, the applicants don't come back to planning board.
So then I guess our only other request ask would be, we do believe that there's still some outstanding SWIP comments from the engineer. If there's any way we could get those in the meantime so that we have the availability.
I think so. I mean, John, you also consult with HCZM, right?
Yes, I'll be reviewing it when it's.
We'll be
in
with you the whole
applications.
time.
Are we anticipating having any of the outstanding comments prior to when we'll submit to them that we can incorporate?
You should have the ones now. Do you not have the ones now?
We have the ones now, but it's mentioned in the memo that the SWIP is still currently under review. So I didn't know if that meant that there were some outstanding comments of which we can be expecting to receive.
None necessarily.
Okay.
I just wanted somebody to, it's really more geared towards the porous pavement. I want other, people in my office to take a careful look at the calculations.
Okay.
I don't see any issue there.
Great. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
But I'll make sure that gets done in the next week. So you have those comments.
Perfect.
Prior to submitting to HCZ. And when you submit to their agency, I'll have a review of the documents at that time, so we can we can respond to any changes you make at that point.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay. So once you type this, it's a type 2 action because of the size. So I need a motion to type this project, this application or project for secret as a type 2 action.
So move.
Need a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I'm not sure, but I think both of you spoke at the same time. So whoever's doing the minutes will pick one. Okay, let's vote. Richard, let's do a vote. Vote on type 2.
Yes.
Okay, Seamus,
Yes.
Ellen,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay. All right, we'll see you in September, I'm sure. We'll hopefully have things wrapped up. We have 2 meetings in September, so. Okay.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank
thank
you
you.
all. Okay. This brings us to the third application of the evening. Is a continuing site plan review for 572 Van Rance Place. The applicant proposes to construct a 5-story building with 10 residential apartment units and some parking. As I think everyone knows, this project is in the flood zone and was flooded multiple times, most recently in September when Ida hit us. I think we have everything we've asked for so far. We have a summary memo from AKRF. And tonight, unless the applicant wants to address us with anything to bring us up to date, discussion is really about secret. I don't know if you, Ms. Motel, you're going to be the spokesperson. Go for it.
Thank you. For the record, Kristen Motel, I'm a partner at the law firm Cuddy and Fader. For the applicants, 572 Van Ranst LLC. And just to make all the planning board members aware, our full team is here again tonight. So Jerry Ryan and Brendan Ahern, the applicants and owners are here, as well as Dan Connors from Aris Energy Solutions, Greg Dallop, Sullivan Architects, Michael Stein, Hudson Engineering, and Brian Dempsey from Divney Provident, who's the traffic engineer. I know everyone is intimately familiar with this project, and we are here in furtherance of SECRA review and a SECRA determination. The materials we provided you with were a result of comments that we received when we were appearing before you in May. Most of them related to the fuel cell system, specifically fire safety. There were comments on noise and local emissions, which were all great questions. So we did provide responses and some of that information I think you've all had a chance to review, but if you'd like to ask questions in more detail, as I mentioned, Dan is here. Emissions are minimal because there is no on-site combustion process involved in the unit. Noise is also minimal. Fire suppression, there's a full suppression system proposed with heat and smoke detectors, firewalls, everything's going to meet local and state code requirements. Per Kellard Sessions request, we also provided a volumetric storage analysis for flood volume storage, which demonstrated an increase in total flood volume storage on the site over existing conditions. And that was approximately, I think, 810 cubic feet of storage on site. Michael Stein is here. He can answer any questions that have to do with that and the stormwater design. And there were additional landscape modifications made as a result of Tarabella's comments. We did include additional flood tolerant shrubs to maximize water uptake, provided some further clarification on the planters, and also an updated school age impact evaluation. So aside from everything else that's been submitted here tonight, we're more than happy to take questions and engage in discussion with the board members. We would submit that the pretty substantial record in this case supports a determination that there will be no significant adverse environmental impacts here, and that the project is truly a model for flood zone development and a great leader in what's to come.
We're fortunate tonight. The building department is going through a transition as Mr. Tavolacci eases into retirement at some point in time. But we have with us tonight Sean Jimison. Now, Sean is our acting building inspector, sharing that job with Dennis Drogan, who's also here. But Sean is also our fire. What's your other title, Sean?
Fire inspector.
He's our fire inspector. And he's also, I guess, a firefighter in his spare time. Sean, you obviously haven't seen any of the paperwork for this. This is your first time joining us. Would you like the consultant who is designing this fuel cell? You and I actually spoke about this. I'm sorry.
We spoke about this briefly when they did the garden dedication at the
when I met you at the poetry garden. Would you like just a short presentation on this to see to just bring you up to speed? We could just run it through just to.
I'd love for them to send me whatever they have. I'd love to look at it.
I mean, we could do a little bit. He could do a little bit of presentation now if you'd like. You know, we haven't seen some of the question. You know, we had a lot of question about fire suppression, as I mentioned to you when I met you that day, and they've answered those questions, but we haven't had them walk us through it or anything. I don't know. Does anybody mind? Oh, yeah, Cindy's back. Thank you. Does anybody mind just having a very brief overview for Sean's benefit, since we have him here tonight? And we might want to ask him some questions about how he feels about some of this stuff, because we certainly aren't experts in this.
We would be happy to, Brittany, if you want to promote Dan Connors from Aris, he can speak to this. And also Greg Dallop from Sullivan Architecture. I know Sullivan Architecture was working with the fire department The fire department received copies of our materials, and John had discussions with them. So they are also involved in the design
Okay.
for emergency evacuation building.
Great, great.
Thank you.
Okay, Greg and Dan are both promoted.
Okay. Let's see, Greg. Dan,
I don't see Dan.
I don't see Dan. Here he is. Okay. All right. If you two gentlemen would, whoever wants to start, a brief overview of the system, your interaction with the fire department, which I think is a good thing. And as we mentioned, as you probably heard, we have the fire inspector from the building department with us tonight. And this way we can bring him up to date and he can act as a planning board if we need it, hopefully. So, okay.
Dan, why don't you get started?
Okay, thank you and good evening, everybody. I just lost a little bit in the transition over from attendee to panelist, but I think we want to review some of the materials we've submitted earlier. Kristen, is there any way to put that on the screen, or should I screen share? I have it on the screen now.
You could probably screen share if Brittany will.
Brittany has to just allow you to do that. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So let me try to.
Yep, you have access to it.
Super. Let me try to cue that up and see if it shows what I want to show. So can everybody see my screen that says Aris Energy Solutions on the top?
Yes.
Okay, great. So in late June, we prepared the submittal, and the first item of which was fire safety. So focusing on that, I think for tonight's discussion, the bullets basically tell the story, the bullet items tell the story, but it's the fuel cell system. First of all, it has no fuel storage. So it's actually in that respect safer than many other boilers or propane tanks. And when the gas is shut off outside the residence, the fuel cell simply shuts down. It has no means of continuing in its production. So in some respects, the fire protection is similar to a gas boiler or a gas furnace. There will be a fire suppression system to meet code for the entire building, including the mechanicals and the electrical cabinets associated with both the solar PV and the fuel cells. We have some details to share, but much of this detailed design has to be done with further design work on the building by the architect and the engineer. But certainly they're going to comply with the standards for smoke detectors, heat detectors, fire rated walls, et cetera, et cetera. Sprinklers are an item that will bring up, often they're not desirable in rooms with electrical panels, and we'll simply follow code to take care of that. And again, when the fire department arrives, the first thing they do is shut off the gas and electric service. And basically that locks down the fuel cells. They go into a shutdown mode and will, not be producing any electricity or consuming any gas in that process. I don't know if I want to pause there and collect any questions.
So one of the questions that I have is, as far as the shutoff goes, where will that shutoff be? And is that something that we would have to do from the street, for example, a curb box or something like that, because we would obviously have to wait for the utility company at that point.
Right. So yes, it would be at the street, and you're literally starving the fuel cell of its fuel, so it has no choice but to shut down.
And with that location, is that accessible in flood conditions?
I think it can be. I think that's a good question, and I think it's a design parameter that can certainly be built in. So that's a really good point. So I think that can be a design requirement. Or ordinarily, it's not an issue, for most building design. for the gas and electric shutoff. But I think in this case, we want to keep both of those things above flood level.
That's pretty much the only question that I have at this moment.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Anything else that you feel that it would be important for Sean to see tonight? Not noise, not, okay, that's good. All right, thank you. Thank you for doing that. Like I said, it's just serendipitous that we have him here with us tonight. Okay. And we do have a memo from Terabella basically confirming what you said with regards to the changes that you've made. I don't know, Susan, if you wanted to say anything else before we get into the discussion of the CEQA.
No, in my opinion, everything was addressed. And they came up with a reasonable solution for adding additional shrubs at the rear. And the rooftop planter information is concise and clear, and everything's included.
Now, before we do this, and we can stop the screen sharing. Before we get into this detailed discussion of secret, I just want to reiterate where we are in the process with this project. Yes, it's been a while since we described this when we first received the application. We are nearing the end, if not the end, we'll find out about that in a short while, of the environmental review, which was the first step of this project. By no means would this mean that, depending on how we go tonight, this means that the project is approved or not. The next step, the applicants can't move through the steps of the process until we do a secret determination of significance. The next step would be for the applicant to go to the zoning board. They are currently requesting multiple variances in order to move forward with this project as it's currently proposed. So that would be the next step, and the zoning board. There's variance for setbacks and parking and multiple. I think there's 5 of them in total. So that's going to be scrutinized and reviewed, and plenty of opportunity for public comment at the zoning board level. And then the zoning board is finished, and assuming they can come to some sort of agreement with the applicant as to how the project's going to look, either with or without variances, the project comes back to the planning board again for complete site plan review. So am I missing anything, either AKRF or Teresa? No. Okay, so let's discuss where we are with the environmental review. And we do have a memo, a summary memo from AKRF, and a draft of a environmental assessment form to begin our discussion. Alicia, do you want to walk us through AKRF's opinion of where we are with this? I'm not sure every member of the planning board is going to agree with you, but why don't we start with this?
All right, so we have a draft form of the EAF, of course, subject to discussion. For most of them, we were inclined towards either no or small impact. But of course, those are all subject to change. So if you want to walk through, if you had any questions about any of the particular decisions, we can talk about that.
Can I suggest you screen share the form, Alicia?
Sure, I can do that.
I mean, obviously, the big issue here is that this is in the flood zone, and the site was inundated with a large amount of water. And I don't know the exact number of what Van Rand's place, but it was 12 to 14 feet in other places. Ida in September. And we've had multiple conversations with this applicant, and they've done multiple changes to the building in order to address that. So the whole concept of the secret review is whether there's a significant environmental impact that has not been mitigated.
I'm having some, I'm not sure, do I have screen sharing capabilities right now? I'm not seeing the option.
You should, let me see. It says you do.
Okay.
You got it?
Is it a form that we posted on the site? I can share it for you if you need to.
I'm not sure. Let me check. I know it was shared with the board. Let me see here.
Yeah, yeah, it's the second to last item I see in all of the materials.
Okay.
today.
Yeah,
I will get it off the website.
Okay, Brittany, share it.
thank you.
So the whole question is, you only need one significant environmental impact that's not been mitigated for a positive declaration. The question is, how do you define significant and whether there's been mitigation? So let's just walk through this. Brittany, got it?
Is this what we're looking for?
Yep. That's
Which page?
Yeah. Can you make it a little larger?
Just a thought. I'd like to, maybe there's some we go fast. I'd like to at least hit on each of the sections. Maybe we just go through it. I don't know what you were thinking, Kathy.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. However, whatever makes sense. We did get the secret. If people who didn't have the secret handbook and didn't look at it, we did get it today. And, what we have to consider in order to make a determination, either positive or negative. We do need to consider every aspect of the project, which I think we've done, and we do need to consider this form and every aspect of the form. So this is all part of it. So let's go through it. Okay, Alicia, you good?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So, I think there are going to be a lot of these items that won't apply. So maybe we just start, go through it. Like my first question was on 1A. How do we know where the water table is? Did somebody test that? And I think rather than water table, if we substituted the word aquifer, it might mean something different to people. So is there a test? Is there science to back that up?
Yes, during construction or during the design phase, we had gone through field testing. A deep test hole was completed, and we encountered groundwater at a depth of 84 inches.
And how many sites how many test pits did you put on the site?
It's a very small site and wouldn't be a need to do any more than that.
Okay, and generally speaking, does groundwater or an aquifer or water table vary with the time of the year and the
yes, but when it can fluctuate. However, part of what we're looking for is modeling in the soil, where you see where the water moves in and out at high points, and we're looking for the high point that it may occur at, which in this case we didn't encounter any. And so what we saw was at the 84-inch mark is where the groundwater was relatively stationary.
Relatively stable. Okay. And
in part, and a lot of a part of that is because you had a very high percolating soil of 30 inches per hour. So it means a very sandy soil. So it's not that water would gets trapped and takes longer to move through. It moves through very quickly.
Okay. I had another question. Michael, do you know the answer to this question? How high was the water during Ida last September at that site?
I think the owner's here and they can attest to that.
Brittany, I think Brendan Ahern is here. as an attendee. You can speak to
Hold on a
that.
second. Let me know if it works because I can't see you guys because I'm screen sharing. Okay, should have worked.
Yeah, I did. I think Brendan, you're on mute.
Oops.
Do we have him?
He's still on mute.
I can't see him.
There you go.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah, this is Brendan here. Hello, everybody.
okay, good. So
Yeah, so
question,
it was about 30 inches above the floor level of the house, and the house is about 3 feet above street level. So it was 5'6" inside the house from the street level. So. Can you hear me?
yes, yes.
Yeah, so from ground level, what, can somebody do that math for me?
I
So,
believe he said 30 inches plus 3 feet is 5.5 feet above.
5.5 feet, you just said 5.6.
Is that above ground level?
Above the street level, yeah.
Street level. Which is elevation, is that around 22, Michael?
The building, right around the building is pretty much around 21.
21, so that would put you at 26.5 elevation.
Yeah, I think that's where we're figuring it was around elevation 26, give or take.
that's, okay, so that's interesting because I think the far end of the block was actually 10 or 12 feet above street level. So there must be some sloping off there. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Back to, okay, we're on page 1. So anybody have any other comments then? Is that how you want to do it? You want to just go section by section, page by page, and everything here is checked no or small impact. But
that would be the best way to do it, Kathy. So
okay.
the question is really, we all agree there's an impact on land. And the only question is A through G, should any of those be moderate to large? And, looking at the list, does anybody have any questions about the box that's been checked?
I don't. Doesn't sound like anybody does. Okay.
To you.
Move on to the next section then, on the top of page 2, which is impact on geological features. And that box is checked no. There's no destruction of cliffs, dunes, and minerals, caves, unless there's an underground cave there that we don't know about, but.
Sounds like there's sand underneath.
It sounds like there's sand, there's sandy soil. Everybody good with no impact on geological features? Okay. Impacts on surface water. Impacts on wetlands, streams, rivers, ponds, lakes. And again, this whole section is checked no. Anybody have any?
This is where I was just going to ask about something Cindy already brought up, which is that, my understanding is there's sort of an aquifer under parts of Mamaroneck, maybe around here. What are we looking for in here? I mean, obviously there's no surface water other than the Mamaroneck River here, but is it trying to get at anything else?
I'm sorry, Seamus. There is a section for groundwater. That's where you would talk about the aquifer.
Okay.
So this is really to ferret out whether there's any surface water in the parcel and whether that surface water is being affected by dredging, turbidity, or soil erosion or anything like that.
Got it. Okay.
Good.
So it sounds like no is the correct answer.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any surface waters on the property.
Keep going.
Top of page 3, now the impact on groundwater.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. So we have a draft check of no. So Brittany, scroll down to the next page of the page. Yeah, right there. Section 4, impact on groundwater. Okay. Who wants to talk about an aquifer?
Well, let's talk about the questions first, okay? And there's H for other impacts. So I just want to make sure that we're orderly, just to make sure we're not missing something.
That's why you're here, Teresa.
Okay.
That's why you get paid the big bucks. Okay.
Well, there's no, this is served with public water. So A is really irrelevant here.
Yeah, we don't have any water wells. Yeah.
Right. And the next question, B, has to do with water supply demand from a local supplier aquifer. And we don't, there's no indication that this use of water is going to cause any of those issues. Same way with C and D, because it's a public sewer. E, again, they're focusing on water supply wells. F, I don't believe that they're storing bulk storage of petroleum or chemical products over groundwater and aquifer. They've put the utilities and everything on the roof essentially to make sure that it doesn't come into contact with it. And really gas doesn't do that anyhow. This natural gas doesn't do that anyhow. So, and then the last has to do with the commercial application of pesticides within 100 feet of a potable drinking water or irrigation sources, also not an issue for purposes of this. So, so the only question is, do you want to deal with the aquifer question, Seamus and Cindy, that you guys have in the context of an impact on groundwater? Or do you want to address that in the context of an impact on flooding?
Yeah.
Is the next question.
Yeah, for me, I think the latter, because it's not like I think that there's drinking water being used for that, or hopefully contamination going into it. I don't know, Cindy or if others agree.
Flooding.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, then we can go straight to 5.
Right. So Brittany, you can scroll down to the bottom half of that page. And here we are, impact on flooding, and obviously that's checked yes.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
So the first question is, and we just want to confirm this, we're not in a, I don't believe you're in a designated floodway. That would actually be part of the estuary or the river or whatever. So that's answered no. And then B and C are definitely yes. So I think this is the issue for the board.
Mm-hmm. Training pad, and D is, does it require any modification of existing drainage patterns? Will it change flood water flows to contribute to flooding? A dam, there's on the site, no, there is a dam, but not there. Okay, so those are the questions on flooding. Okay, so the question then is that maybe we come back to it after we finish the form.
That's right.
Well, if you'd like, I could address it right now from one of the documents that we had submitted for the flood storage analysis plan.
Mm-hmm.
Your choice, whichever you'd like.
Yeah, why don't we address it now? I mean, the question for the board is whether there's a significant environmental impact, and significant is a term that's not well defined in the law. It's sort of left up, it's a little bit subjective, but we have to consider two factors: magnitude and importance. Those were the two things that are in the law that we need to consider with regards to the definition of significance. So Okay, so
Can I suggest, in the interest of getting through the form and then discussing the moderate to large impacts that have been addressed, maybe
do
at
it all at the end.
the end?
That was
That's what.
yeah, that was kind of my first instinct, but since Michael popped up, okay.
All right.
All right. Okay, so right now we have two yeses checked. Okay.
That's right. And I guess my only question is, E, the proposed action may change floodwater flows that contribute to flooding. Does everybody feel that's a no, or small impact may occur?
Which one? E? I'm sorry.
And Edward.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
oh, E, yeah. May change floodwater flows. Well, isn't the purpose of the building and the storage and whatnot not to do that?
Yeah, I think that's been mitigated as, as much as possible. That
Right.
that one doesn't, I would agree it's a small or
Yeah.
no impact.
Right.
Okay, great. I just wanted to be sure. That's all.
Okay.
And are we making, or is the idea that that's covered by the on-site plans? I know we're going to hear more about that from Michael, but at least anecdotally, I often hear about the flow of the direction of water in the very flooded conditions. People have lived there for a long time and see things changing as development comes in. I mean, has it been studied, how water moves and how having a bigger building there would just impact everything around in one of the, the conditions where that's under 10 feet of water?
Well, there's a building there now. It's a small site. I mean, I don't know how much bigger the footprint here is here. Michael could probably speak to that, but
Existing building is recessed from the street, though.
the existing building it's not right out on the street.
Right.
Yeah, Michael can talk about this a little bit more. There's also no stormwater infrastructure there now.
Right.
So in the event of a flood, there's just nothing to retain water on site, control the flow of stormwater. And so we are proposing to accept and not release all of the stormwater volume from a storm event. So Michael, I don't know if you have anything to add. That's a little more technical.
Yeah, no, that's definitely one of the main points. And all the stormwater is being taken and actually infiltrated. Again, we have very good percolation rates, as well as the flood storage volume that we're providing in the proposed condition actually exceeds what is available in the existing condition.
Well, that's stormwater. This is about flood flows. So the question is, does the placement of the structure on the property or the change between the existing structure and the proposed structure affect how floodwater flows will act in that area or not?
That's a great question. And the current building does not meet flood development and FEMA standards because it predates that. The building we're proposing is going to be lifted. In fact, that's one of the variances we need from the zoning board. So we're lifting it nearly 8 feet above the base flood elevation. FEMA and village standards require only 2 feet above. So we're lifting the building 8 feet above base flood, right, to allow the flood water to move freely. And that actually goes to, what we'll talk about with flooding a little bit later in terms of the impact to the flood zone, right? Because we're going above and beyond flood development standards and greatly improving the condition as it exists now.
Yeah, that I think addresses it pretty directly. Because do you mean that the lot now will allow floodwater, whether it's receding or moving or whatever, to move better than currently, right?
Correct, as it has to. I mean, that's what, and Greg from Sullivan Architecture knows a lot more about this than I do, but the requirements for development in a flood zone require that. So, right now you have a building that doesn't comply with that, and it's not allowing the flow of flood water. What we're proposing.
The building is lifted, but there's still the garage and the cars.
So
it's not like there's nothing there and water can just flow through. You have a garage, you have cars, and also the building as proposed is not having any side setbacks. I think the side setbacks are going to 0, so that's an issue for me.
So the garage is going to be equipped with the required flood vents to allow the flow of water and back and forth. It's not a solid wall. And also the side yard setback, we only need that variance because of the queuing platform that we're putting at the second floor. If that's not the footprint of the building, that's only a second floor queuing platform that Harbor Coastal requested that we incorporate. And in correspondence with emergency responders, that was something that we added to the project later on. But it does encroach into the side yard setback, even though it's not at grade.
Okay, so when you talk about the queuing platform, you mean the place where people go if there's flooding so they can get out? I just wanted to make sure I was.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem.
Some of us are so far into this. Thank you, Teresa. It's helpful.
All right. Okay, then I think we can go on to 6 and knowing that we're going to come back to B and C. Okay.
Come back to B and C, right. Okay, impacts on air. This is checked yes. But everything is checked no or small impact.
Yeah, this section of the EAF is really meant more for like a power plant or something that's going to have an air emission source that's not associated with, residential housing typically. So they're not close to any of these thresholds. And I believe they confirmed that they don't even need a state air registration for what they're proposing to put here. Is that correct, Kristen?
Yes, that's correct, because there's no on-site combustion that's occurring.
So really, the form should be checked no for impacts on air.
You could do it that way. There are some pollutants that are being emitted, but not in the quantities that they have them listed here, Cindy.
Not 1,000 tons a year of
no, no.
Who writes these things? Where do they live?
DEC does they create the forms. So.
Right.
Okay. Whoops.
Okay. All right, everybody comfortable with 6? Let's move on to 7, plants and animals. The proposed action may result in a loss of flora or fauna, and it's checked no. I don't think anybody's gonna disagree with that.
No.
That brings us to 8, impact on agricultural resources. I don't know.
That's a no.
On the land. That's a no. Okay. 9, impact on aesthetic resources. That's also a no. Let's see. Is there a scenic resource there on the site? I don't think so. Everybody good on that? And then we have 10, impact on historic and archaeological resources. And this is checked yes, that the proposed action may occur in or adjacent to a historic or archaeological resource. Is that because the building's old?
It may be something that's automatically checked.
Yeah, it's probably automatically checked. I don't know.
Yeah, Michael, I think it was automatically checked because of the retaining walls in the Mamaroneck River.
Maybe Alicia, the KRF filled this out for us. Alicia, can you?
Right. So this was matched very helpfully since they have the references here. This was matched to the submitted part 1. So likely what happens
off part 1. Okay.
Right. So one of these questions, was marked yes, but on, the specific analysis, it was either no or pretty small.
Okay. So Kristen, if you guys checked it, yes, you checked it because of the river. Yeah.
Here it says archaeological site inventory.
Right.
So, oh no, is that filled in? No. Okay. I'm just trying to look through the EF here.
I don't think anybody really.
It's the last page. It's the Sheldrake River retaining wall.
Okay. Sorry.
Right.
Okay. All right, we're going fast for you, Brittany. 11, impact on open space and recreation. Now that's checked no. Impact on a critical environmental area. That's checked no. I don't think that's designated a critical environmental area here in Mamaroneck. Impact on transportation. No. Impact on energy. Yes. Proposed action may cause an increase in the use of energy. We're going from a single family home or multiple, I don't know. I think it's in one family.
Pretty much always yes, and it's no or small impact may occur because it's just the way they have the question. You've just got to say yes because
Right.
there are more units, but
Right.
not.
Right. You're going from 4 units to 10 units.
Right.
Impact on noise, odor, and light. That's also checked yes with no or small impact on noise levels. And we had a discussion about the noise level from the mechanicals and the fuel cells on the roof. Blasting, no. Odors for more than an hour a day, no. Okay. Light shining into adjoining properties, no. Impact on human health. New or existing sources of contaminants, that's checked no. Consistency with community plans. It's not, the question is it not consistent? And the answer is no, it's consistent. There are several buildings right with it. And consistency with community character, and that too is checked no. That brings us back to impact on flooding. The action is in a 100-year floodplain and a 500-year floodplain. So that's 5, bottom of page 3.
5B and C.
Yeah, 5B and C, the bottom of page 3. Okay, those are the two, that's the big question here. This is in a flood zone. And everybody is still smart and from Ida, and this application came in right after that. And you've done a lot of work. So I don't know, Michael, you wanted to say a few words about this?
Yeah, and if I could have the share screen, I could bring it right up, and I think that would be helpful.
Okay, I don't think we need the form anymore on the screen. So but you could take yours down and give Michael.
Okay, so this is one of the documents we had submitted. This was a flood storage analysis that we had prepared. So the different colors represent different elevations on the site. If you look to the one on the left, that's existing conditions. The units on the diagram on the right is the proposed conditions. We put together a summary of the flood storage volume at each elevation. So the intent of this plan is to demonstrate that at each of the elevations on the site, we're not taking up any flood storage volume at that elevation, because you may have some storms that only floods to elevation 20. So if just because you provide more volume at a higher elevation, it doesn't mean you've mitigated it at that same elevation. So in this case, at elevation 19 and below, both have, we have no storage below that level. In the existing conditions at elevation 20 and below, we have 979 cubic feet of storage volume in the existing conditions. In the proposed conditions, that actually increases to 1,220 cubic feet of storage. And keep going all the way up. In the end, for the total flood storage volume within that, we're greater we have more flood storage volume being provided at each of the incremental storage levels. And in total at the end, you can see right down here, we go from 9,263 cubic feet of storage within the site below elevation 22, and we've increased that to 10,915, almost 1,700 cubic feet additional storage that's being provided. But at the same time, but that doesn't also account for, we have rainwater that goes, lands and falls on the existing building. That water is not mitigated or provided treatment for. That water actually drops to the ground and contributes to flooding in the area. So in the proposed condition, what we're actually doing is, in addition to providing an additional 1,700 cubic feet of flood storage volume, we're actually now taking any roof water that was previously dropping to the ground and contributing to flooding, and we're taking that offline. So overall, there's a net benefit. And so in my opinion, the actual answer would be no, we're not having any major impacts, because we're actually providing more flood storage volume. The footprint of the proposed building for the first floor, that's also going to have flood vents, so that the building will actually be able to be flooded going in and out. And we've had conversations about it. And the finishes in that and within the building will be made to accommodate flooding to happen. So they'll be washable, so won't be under construction every single time it floods. Those surfaces will be made to survive getting flooded.
And it's something additional I just wanted to add on that note, and the note of how high we're lifting the building. The secret handbook does talk about development in a flood zone in terms of impacts. And one of the considerations is if we're exceeding floodplain development standards. In this case, we're going, like I said, 8 feet above the base flood elevation. And we're exceeding that, we're improving existing conditions. So all of that contributes to no significant adverse impact. If anything, as Michael said, it's a significant improvement compared to the existing building and the existing conditions.
Okay, but in a storm like Ida, which we used to think, was a rare occurrence, and the storms are getting more frequent and more severe, in the scheme of things, and I think you've done an excellent job with the building. I think it's state of the art. I'm very impressed. But in the scheme of things, any extra storage or handling of water here is literally inconsequential when the whole area is inundated with between 6 and 12 feet of water that doesn't always come from rain. So I'm discounting the rain aspect that Michael described. While it's important, in a major flood event with riverine flooding from all those rivers flowing into that area, I still have a problem increasing the number of people living in harm's way, no matter how good the building is designed. And I absolutely applaud you for that. But at some point, yeah, I know about the evacuation potential, and the fact that they will still have power and they could ride out a few days if they can't leave the building. But at some point, our first responders are going to be stressed beyond capacity. We may already be there. We don't know. But there's certainly anecdotal evidence that people were looking to be rescued on the first night of Ida, and no one could get to them. It's impossible unless you have a fleet of Zodiacs that's going to go around to each building. At what point do we? I don't know what this village is going to do. The Army Corps plan is not going to be the answer, but because it's not going to solve the flooding issue. So, this is one project in a floodplain with more increasing violent storms. So as good as this is, looking at the entire area, I don't see how the village can keep new residents safe. And I hope somebody can find a way to address that, but that's kind of what I'm looking for. Maybe there isn't anything, but I am reticent to intensify residential use in this area when we have no way to keep people safe.
So right now on site, there are 2 large units, which at one time, and I know Brendan's on, he can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe during Hurricane Ida, there were about 10 people who lived there. The 10 units we're proposing, 6 of them are 1-bedroom units, right? So the number of people we're proposing to add to the flood zone is very small. I know the units 10 to 2 looks large, but the reality is the number of people that could be there now, that could be there in the next storm, that were there in Ida, is not far off from the number of people from the increase we're proposing in a much safer condition with much better flood volume storage and much better emergency evacuation procedures. So I don't know, Brendan, if you have anything to add to that, or Greg.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So we have a unit there right now, and if we don't get permission here, all we're going to do is put the unit back in, fix up the unit and rent it. It's a 4-bedroom unit. There's a 3-bedroom upstairs, and put people in real harm's way. So right now we have taken everybody out of harm's way, and we have made every effort to do that. Say with the fuel cells, the platform, people can stay in the building. And we're making a situation, I mean, safe, if you ask me. Say we can put people in danger and go back in and finish the units that's there. And the basement, there's a basement there also, and that fills up with water. We're taking away the basement, we're taking away the first floor, and we're bringing everybody above, well above the flood elevation. So we're making the situation really, really better here. So, and the only other option, if we don't get approval for this, we're going to put people, like the last time there was, I think 7 people they weren't at home at the time. There was only 2 people at home at the time, but there was 2 people that had to go upstairs to avoid the flood.
All right.
Can I ask?
get a sense that it's an incremental, but I mean, I think all of us are reluctant to put people in harm's way. I think that you've addressed the fact that people, if they took the necessary precautions, and, move their cars, stocked up on food, they should be able to stay for some, and their medications or whatever, and I've heard this more than once. What if somebody has a heart attack? Well, yeah, what if somebody has a heart attack? So maybe we have to remove 1 person or 2 people or something. You got, I forget what you just called it, but the staging area to try to get people out of the building. The buildings across the street, the building across the street from that, at the same day that I met Sean at the garden, I also met someone who lives across the street and had to climb over a parapet with his wife. He's not a young person, but he's not that old either. But he had to climb over a parapet, and there was a drop to the boat. The water wasn't all the way up to the parapet, and they had to kind of jump into a soft bottom boat, which was full of water and not fun. We can address that with some sort of a way to have where your staging area to remove people is with, and if the boat's below them, we can kind of figure that out. I'm sure some engineer can come up with something somewhere along the line. But here's my question, and my question is to our land use attorney. The zoning code allows housing. Now, granted, you need a lot of variances to that code for various things, including height, so that you do have the flow through of the water. But we do allow housing. As much as we'd like to not put more people in harm's way, we have to follow the laws. We have to follow the secret law, and we have to follow the codes of the village. So Teresa, please advise us on how far can we take this? The applicant is has done a lot of things to mitigate this. Just give us some advice, please.
Sure. From a zoning perspective, the use is allowed. The variances that are requested are area variances related to dimensional issues with respect to the structure. Okay, so they don't really go to the number of people or really the number of units in that sense. So I think the only variance that they are now requesting, which really is inconsistent with the zoning, given the characteristics of the site, is the desire to drop the affordable housing unit, okay, which will go before the zoning board of appeals with that question. So this area of the town under the current zoning code allows this type of housing, and it's being used for multifamily housing now, and it's next to a large multifamily housing unit, and there's one across the street as well. So, I don't think the planning board is in a position to say, you know, we can decide not to allow residential units in this location. The question for the planning board is, does it, for those areas where you are concerned, and that's clearly being in the 100-year floodplain and the 500-year floodplain, looking at the baseline conditions at the site and the design that they've proposed, is there going to be a significant adverse environmental effect? Or by complying with and going beyond the requirements, have they, to the extent they possibly can, mitigated any future potential adverse environmental effects? That's the question. And that's wholly within the discretion of the planning board to decide.
Okay, so that's the question. All right.
Can I ask one quick question on just what's on the screen before we lose it?
Sure.
So I think I have a guess, but I'll just ask. So if the surface area is larger in the proposed than existing, is the building not included? I guess it's not colored in.
Michael, that's a question for you.
Well, Michael's looking at that. I know the building footprint we're proposing is smaller than the existing building footprint.
Yeah, what I'm basically trying to figure out is if you add up the surface area in the first column, it's like 5,000 existing, 6,400 proposed. So I just want to make sure that the additional storage isn't an accident of looking at more space. And Michael, I think you might be on mute. I'm not sure if you're speaking or not, but.
Sorry, I'll go back and double check. I don't know the answer off the top of my head.
And it could be very important in that I think the thesis here is that there's more flood storage, but if it wasn't compared correctly, then I don't know that I'm confident in that conclusion at the moment.
And let me just say, it is perfectly fine for the planning board to need additional information. That's why I said, you know, it's important that you have all the information you need to make a determination.
Do we have any kind of opinion from the first responders? Again, you know, it's all incremental, you know, in terms of their confidence in evacuating people. 'Cause I mean, that's really my only issue here. I know that, you know, obviously this can be developed according to the zoning code with or without variances, depending on how that goes. You know, it may be something as simple as requiring, this is a rental building, if I recall properly, that all the leases or you know, they do an annual drill, or they have to, you know, comply with evacuation notices. I mean, that would solve a lot of the problem if everybody just evacuated with an early warning system. I mean, we've got to give people a fighting chance, and sheltering in place in a building for 3 or 4 days, you know, is not so much fun, even if you don't have a heart attack.
So Cindy, the owners of the building would do exactly that. And that goes to moving cars too, right? Not just moving people. So they would be willing to agree to a similar condition. As I mentioned before, we have been including the emergency responders on our plans. John Sullivan's office has reached out and had discussions with them. It's my understanding that, and I think we had talked a little bit about this a few months ago, given the nature of those positions, there isn't going to be anything put into writing about the project, but they have been looped in. We have received feedback. We've made significant amendments to the plans based on that. And to your point, which is a great one, I mean, a lot of it is management and preparedness, which is excellent. And Brendan's on, but I think I speak for him when I say that's absolutely something that they would agree to.
Is that something that you can amend, quote unquote, amend your application to state, Kristen, so we have it in the record?
The state, well, I know we do have in the record from a few months ago stating that we would have a emergency evacuation plan, an emergency management plan, and we work with the village to figure out what that was. When we reached out, there wasn't an existing template. And I think this is going back to February or March. So, that's already in the record, but if there's something additional that goes above and beyond whatever would be encompassed in that, we could certainly do that.
Well, I think it would be easier for the planning board members to make a finding with respect to seeker if they had what the components of that evacuation plan are going to be. Am I right, Cindy? That's what you're looking for. And
yes, essentially, and some way to implement it so in 5 years it's still there. And I don't know what that is, and maybe there's something else out there that I don't know about that first responders might know would be helpful. I mean, this, people build in the floodplain all the time, but maybe they don't take a lot of precautions. And if you're willing to do the paperwork, which and be as robust in a plan to keep tenants and visitors apprised of what's going on, that would help me.
Well, there's a lot of things at play here. There were a lot of buildings built in that area before Ida. They weren't, they were raised and on the ground floor, there was only parking and everybody was supposed to move their cars, but during Ida, nobody moved their cars and thousands of cars were lost in the village of Mamaroneck. The same thing with the Avalon building. They too were supposed to move their cars and nobody moved their cars. New people moved in, it's a rental, it's a short-term rental, new people moved in, they weren't told the fact that, you're in a floodplain, they didn't do their homework, whatever. There was a lot of property loss and a lot of evacuations had to be made. But we are in a village that's going to continue to flood. I don't think anybody thinks anything different. And it's going to get worse as climate changes. We have to learn to live with this. If it means that we need more assistance in times of emergency, I asked the question, I don't remember who answered this for me, and it might even have been Sean, about how many boats we had and what type of boats and how many were operating at any one time. I was under the impression that there weren't that many, but there were a lot. The answer was there were a lot more than I thought, and I don't remember the details of this. It was in passing at another event. We have to learn how to live with this somehow, and I don't know what the answer is. But an emergency management plan for a rental building and making sure that all new renters, anybody who comes in there knows what they're getting themselves into. And that they have to pay attention to the warnings. So we just moved something and my computer screen changed. Okay. They sign a lease and they sign a statement that says, I understand that, there are things I'm going to have to do if there are flood warnings and pay attention to them.
But to be practical, Kathy, that's not a very good marketing ploy.
I understand that, but we have to find, human beings are human beings. They're going to have to get dragged out.
Well, I think, what Ida showed us, the prior storms, I think it was the regulars, the old timers, the people who have lived there in generations. They're used to flooding. Not that it's any easier for them, but it wasn't such a surprise. But what we saw were people's possessions, and people were devastated, and they had no idea
They had no
they
idea.
lived in a flood prone area. And it was that lack of knowledge that made them think, oh, it's just a drill. I don't really have to evacuate. But human nature, I can't fight that either.
I mean, even people who literally had a commercial property right next to the river said there were just so many warnings, and they just kept changing them. I mean, they didn't do anything. I mean, my garage, luckily my car wasn't there, but they lost 30 clients' cars. They didn't move anything. So, okay, you can do the best you can, but people are going to be people. But with fair warning, you're right. There's a lot of turnover, and there's a lot of new people in those buildings. They were caught completely unaware. So where are we? Do we feel like we would like more information? Seamus, you want check those numbers? Teresa suggested that maybe we flesh out a little bit an emergency management plan before we finalize this.
And just so you know, looking through and going through the numbers here, the reason why that building wasn't counted is because we're up to elevation 22, which is the flood zone elevation. At elevation 22, there's no penetrations through the foundation, so there'd be no water getting in to flood the basement.
So is that, and just help me, right? Because you're the engineer here. Wouldn't you want to compare surface area to surface area? Should you add different heights, or are you going to a height because of flood
basically levels? No. So basically, everything above elevation 22, the entire site's going to flood in both conditions.
Okay.
So, but up to that elevation, since there's no penetrations in the foundation for water to get into, that's actually, it doesn't, you have no flooding there.
John, do you have anything you can add there? Maybe I'm having trouble understanding.
Oh, I understand what Michael's saying, and we'll take a careful look at it.
Yeah.
No offense, Michael, the failure is mine, not yours, but
No, I'll definitely work with John. That's not a problem at all.
I get it. I do get it intuitively, but I would like to be able to make more sense of the actual tables. It would almost be like at a flood level of some amount, in both conditions, how much water is on site. And I think that's kind of what this is doing, but maybe we can all try to get a little bit more.
We'll take a careful look at it.
Yeah. So Kathy, you half asked me a question a minute ago. So the two, if you want to ask me all the way, I think that table, and then the other thing that we brought up earlier that I think is important is probably understanding what the plan is to shut the gas off specifically if it's in a flooded condition. Because I think we do have, effectively this mini power plant on the top, which the presentation that was provided was really helpful. Things like noting that the emissions are half of what the downstate element of the grid is. That's exactly responsive to what I was thinking. But I think that the safety aspect of getting that gas turned off, which the applicant raised, clearly that's what they want to do in a flooded condition, is probably the other key item for me.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know how far off the ground that shutoff is going to be. So if it's only 6 feet off the ground, it's going to be inundated. So
since we have representatives from the building department here, is there anyone who could shed a little bit light on that for us right now in terms of all the new development that's happened in the recent years and what the standard is for the emergency shutoff?
So this is Dennis from the building department. So majority of emergency shutoffs should be readily available, right? The code specifies that in multiple places, and the fire code as well. There probably will be a solenoid valve attached to the unit on the roof. So if there was a fire or something like that, or a leak, that would indicate it, and there would be a shutoff at that point upstairs. Beyond that, coming down on the riser, yeah, I mean, there could be one at an apartment level. There could be multiple shutoffs, so if a resident knows that there is a flood, they can hit a relay, and that relay can turn off a main valve located close to the rooftop or secondary. That's all up to the design professional for the system. There could also be, as a building inspector, we don't design your buildings, right? So just keep that in mind as I'm responding to this. These are just things I'm throwing out. Also, there's flood sensors, there's water sensors, there's humidity sensors. That could be wired or relayed into the system to indicate there's 5 feet of water outside in the measuring tube, which is giving the elevation of the flood water, and that would automatically shut off that feed to the power supply, either electric or gas, propane, if it will. So that those are just a couple things that can be done. Like a simple alarm by your garage door to let you know that there's water inside triggers your fire alarm in your house to let you know that there's flood water or there's watering entering your home. There's Bluetooth devices. It's very simple. So, the design professional who's working on that component will definitely be able to find a source or something to assist in disconnecting the gas, then using the curb box that will be submerged. I mean, 6 inches of water, the box is almost rendered useless because you got to find it. That's the hard thing. So, if there's something mounted on the side of the building, what height? 6 feet, 8 feet, 15 feet, everything's subject to change. If, for instance, there's another container that comes down the road and lands against the shutoff outside the building, that's rendered useless. There's a gas station next door, there's cars that can all be pushed against the building. So having something that's probably located internally where a resident or a smart system using that flow sensor or switch to turn it off would probably be the better route of going than depending on a outside manual turn off that could be obstructed or blocked or buried or underwater.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, Dennis.
Yeah, no worries.
Helpful. Okay, so it sounds like we have a few items that we would like to add to the record before we make our final determination. Is that a fair assessment of where we are, planning board?
Yes, but I guess my question is, I think we know that this is an unlisted action, and really the major question is whether it's going to be POS-decked or neg-decked. Is that what we're talking about?
Absolutely.
That's
This is where we
exactly-
are. We're determining the significance. Yeah.
Okay.
But for purposes of tonight, you have come a long ways. You've agreed on the form and you've agreed on what your additional questions are. So is there any other additional questions you'd like answered? Because I would, when we fill out the part 3, it's a little bit involved because when we look at this issue, we're going to have to come up with a written reasoned elaboration of whichever way you go. So if there's any additional information you need, now is definitely the time to let us know so we can be ready to do the part 3 next time. And the part 3 is, it's the POS-deck or the neg-deck.
I think just 3 things that we've identified: the flood storage table, just making sure that everything's good, and John's going to look at that. The shut off we just talked about with Dennis. Emergency management plan, I think Ms. Motel had said that they reached out to the village and there is no model. They didn't get a lot of detail. They'd have to sort of like create it or copy it from someplace else. I don't know. How does the board feel about sort of like not a full-blown emergency management plan, with all the bells and whistles and all the I's dotted and T's crossed, but more of a sort of a conceptual approach or an outline, this is what we're going to be working on and this is what we're working towards and to move this along.
Well, I think, Kristen, there are plenty of emergency plans out there. And I'm sure that you can find one that, FEMA promotes. They do a lot of those emergency evacuation plans. Also, the State Emergency Management Office has those. I'm not sure why the village had trouble finding it, but the village would have one as well because they have, a flood program, a flood permitting program. So I believe that's a requirement of that. I don't think that's going to be particularly helpful to you though, in the context of one building.
Right.
So I would say, tell us what you're going to do to make sure that every person who moves in there who's blissfully ignorant is ready to go when there's a flood. That's really the board's concern.
Right. And make sure that it's not something that's done with the first tenants and then it sort of dies like it did at the Avalon. And then,
Madam
5,
Chair,
10 years from now.
if I may have a second. So if going back to the alarms that we discussed or I mentioned a couple minutes ago, they can be wired into the fire system, or there could be a different sounding strobe letting the residents know that there is a flood that's happening or there is an occurrence. That's something that could be wired in the system. Now, as for the existing structure that they've presented, they do have the rescue area, which is, that was nice that they added that there. Is that area sufficient to the operations within the village that we currently use? Front loaders, lows, boats. It depends on the height of the water. And people sheltering in place doesn't mean that they're going to be in place, want to be in place for a long period of time. And you're speaking about that and you're going through all of it, but they do have some items in place. They're going to have the fire alarm in there. There's definitely ways that they can elaborate on their existing system. And throughout the structure, they'll have paths of egress mounted by the doors. Or they will be asked that they have a path of egress indicating the staircase and so forth. So perhaps if they would like to add to that, saying in case of a fire is, this red placard, in case of a flood, it's this placard. Either way, during the times of inspection, it's hard for the building department to work with a potential flood that we don't know the elevations, but we can only do what comes at us at that time. It's the only thing we can take care of. So the precautionary period is, you're absolutely right, is, shop around, look at other municipalities, look at other areas down south, find out what their flood plans are for evacuation or sheltering in place and expand from there. Thank you.
I think you heard with the last applicant that we have one more meeting in July. And then we don't meet again until September. Obviously, 2 of the 3 things we just talked about, you probably could get to us by Friday to get onto the agenda for the next meeting. Think about whether you could pull something together for the emergency management plan. We wouldn't have a problem getting you on the agenda for the last meeting in July. Since we've done so much work, we're at this point, I don't have a problem with that. I don't think anybody else on the board. There's not a lot of review that people are going to have to do of what you submit. So if you can pull an emergency management plan or put something together, as we just said, as Teresa just said, what are you going to be doing type of thing. You don't have to have it all signed, sealed, and delivered. We'll take it from there. Okay. All right. This has been everybody else, everybody good? We still have one more item on the agenda. It's fine. It's late. A poor person who's waiting to talk to us. Brittany, why don't you let Neil know that we're ready to wrap. We're wrapping up and we're ready for him to come on. All right. Okay.
Thank you.
We know where we are. Everybody understands it. You guys understand where we are? I think we're good. All right. Okay, this brings us to the last item on the agenda, which is just a discussion with the village's comprehensive plan update consultant, Neil Desai, and I don't remember the name of the firm he's with. You can fill us in on that. But the planning board's participation in the review of a comprehensive plan.
Kathy, you don't need me now, right?
No, we don't.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye. It's 9:30. 36. And John, we don't need you.
Good night.
And good night. Mr. Ahern, and good night. And even Dennis, we don't probably need you unless you want to hear about the comp plan. We're not going to do anything substantive tonight, but thank you. You were very helpful tonight, you and Sean both. And there's Neil, there he is. Okay, Brittany, could you, yes, thank you. Okay, I'm so sorry, Neil, this took much longer.
The nature of the beast, you know,
So
that's planning board.
Let me just, I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the company that you are with.
It's a Hardesty and Hanover.
Harvesty in Hanover. It sounds like a law firm.
It does, unfortunately.
Okay. We want to just sort of have a conversation with you today. The members of the planning board that are here have not really been involved with anything with regards to this comprehensive plan, or even maybe any other comprehensive plan. And we understand from a previous communication with you that you're looking to get comments on the current draft by the end of the month of July so that you can do rewrites in August. And we have a meeting on the 27th in July. So that's easy for us to put that as our deadline for comments. And then our consulting planner, who is not with us tonight, but she's represented by Alicia Moore, Ashley Lai, who I think you know, has volunteered to put all our comments together and get them to you. So
excellent.
Have a plan on how we're going to move forward. But I think that if you could sort of fill us in a little bit on what we need to know at this point in order to productively participate in the process. That's one question I have. Many of us looked at the comprehensive plan in preparation for this meeting and saw that the last draft was, 2020, and you started it much before that, and a lot has changed in the village. I don't know if we're going to be updating a lot of the data. There's a lot of talk about Sandy, and we just had a very long discussion. The planning department no longer exists, and there's a lot of reference to the planning department in there. So I don't think you need those kind of comments from us.
Right.
But what do we need to know to begin a better review? And then what would you like to see from the planning department, the planning board? How can we be helpful to the whole process? And then we can sort of drill down on what we need to do and get it done and to you in the next couple of weeks. Okay.
Sure. I think, thanks. I appreciate your getting in touch with me before I could get in touch with you.
We have a recess in August,
Yeah.
so we need to move fast.
Yeah. So the Board of Trustees, the one important thing is that the initial impetus for the comprehensive plan, the initial guidance, it's probably embedded in the beginning of this draft, but there was a set of kind of principles that the Board of Trustees wanted the plan to focus on: sustainability, resiliency to a certain degree, more sustainability, although there's, those terms are certainly related in certain ways, but we all know what resilience talks about, which is, flooding and hurricanes and resilience to storms and neighborhood character. And I think that's, the Board of Trustees, that was the initial charge. Those are the kind of the sections that are the longest in this 2020 draft. You'll notice the sustainability chapter is quite thick, which is great. I think there's been tremendous accomplishments that the village has made with the help of the committee from the environment, the tree committee, and that thing, and following through on climate smart things, climate smart achievements, and that'll continue to be the case. And then you'll see that the residential neighborhood section is quite thick. But I think there's, as far as the planning board the planning board, I think chapters 5 and chapter 6 are really the crux of what the planning board, I mean, you're welcome to comment on anything, of course, but chapter 5 and chapter 6 are really the two chapters that are fall within, the things that you go through on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. And there's a lot of detail in subdivisions. There's a lot of detail, and especially in the chapter 5 in residential neighborhoods. And so this is all a result of just the impetus, the goals of the Board of Trustees that originally, some of them are the same members, but I think there are one or two that were different at the time. Now I'm seeing, and affordable housing is touched on, but not in the way it needs to be in this comprehensive plan within chapter 5 or chapter 6. I think I see that as being without a doubt, one of the critical, it is one of the 6 goals, I think, the 6 topic areas in the very beginning of the comp plan that's mentioned. But I think with everything I've heard, it's really taken on a very a more urgent status, and so that needs to really come out of that. And so one thing that I remember being part of sitting in on one of the board of trustee meetings where the Affordable Housing Coalition members had given a few presentations. I believe, Ms. Savolt, you had actually talked a little bit. There's been so many meetings I've been to, I don't recall exactly, but I do have a call set up with them because I wanted to get a sense of what they've been doing, what things they believe are really important, that are actions that the municipality could take. And so with that, I think I want to come up with more. That's a big ball. It's a humongous ball of wax, affordable housing, and I think it goes from everything from, and when there was a planning department, I know that Greg Cutler had done a lot of research and digging through and getting a lot of important data points, but of course that kind of ended in 2018 or so. So we have everything from when affordability provisions expire on certain places. I'm just going to give you a couple of things. So it's more than just building. It's when do affordability provisions expire? Are there buildings that are susceptible to being sold and purchased by a new entity? It covers all kinds of ground. And to the extent that I'd like to be able to the extent that a comprehensive plan can lay a framework for actions toward affordable housing, I think that's something that I believe is an area that this next draft should do. So it's more than just updating the draft in a lot of senses. It's kind of relooking at what the priorities are, which I believe to be affordable housing, much more on resilience, goes without saying, after Hurricane Ida. And so I think affordable housing is one topic that is touched upon, but it's not appropriately kind of, there's no kind of framework set aside for the village to act upon it. Now, the moratorium study that took place, that was one of the things which actually also kind of put a pause on the comprehensive plan. It was not just COVID, it was also the moratorium study. And it was really important for myself, and I think, and in chapter 6, I really provide a lot of detail into the moratorium study, the thinking that we did as consultants to the Board of Trustees, and that's why you see there's a discussion of the different characters of the corridors, and so we thought that was important to emphasize because I think the C2 zoning is at least as a place, it's a character-based zoning because it covers the downtown, the main downtown, Mamaroneck Avenue. But when places have different characteristics, the typical, and yet they have the same zoning, in this case, I mean C1 zoning along each of the four, I guess I call them the four character districts on Post Road. And then I think that's just kind of a more forward-looking thing, like why is Post Road East treated with the same zoning as Post Road West? Should it be treated with the same zoning? Should there be some variation, because they've evolved into quite different places as they are now, and so that's one aspect of it. The second aspect is the potential for affordability was reduced during the zoning changes that took place in the moratorium study, and now I don't know if I don't think the board has an appetite to really revisit that. The zoning strategies. I mean, there's a lot of detail that I provide in there about the decisions that they did make. I think one of the lines here, this is on page 105. That's a lot of pages. The text amendments, which is the PLLC 2019, reduces the overall potential for apartment and townhouse development in the village by 44% from the full potential of the infill housing provision. They did maintain, so I really go into detail about what the moratorium study changes exactly did and what they didn't. Where did they maintain affordability provisions? Where did they remove them? And now, so I don't necessarily like I said, affordability covers a lot more ground. Well, certainly the development of affordable housing is one huge aspect of providing affordable housing, but there's a range of other strategies that I think should be part of a framework. I guess I would like to get a reaction to. I mean, it's really chapter 6. Chapter 6. It's really it's very detailed. But I think I would be curious to know, I guess, your reaction to whether now or later, come to some of your thoughts on chapter 6 in terms of, were you aware of all these, all the inner workings of the moratorium study and the resulting zoning changes? What is your thoughts on the way we kind of characterize these we call them character districts, village, downtown, mixed residential corridor. And that's kind of another area because, when we I remember having a conversation with the board about Halstead Avenue. And, that has an interesting character and it's a C1 district, very similar to the other ones. I guess I just want to get some thoughts on that approach to starting to think about the way we separate that into different character districts. So that's a couple of things. It's just the character districts, the nitty gritty of the moratorium study, and then we in chapter 6 we also kind of profiled each of the different character districts. I guess, do all of you have this in front of your screen, or is this something I should project, you think, or you think we're okay just now, just discussing it for now?
Okay, just discussing it.
Okay.
But, the moratorium study, I think it was going on the planning board, the planning board 3 years ago, and I don't really remember any involvement or anything about this.
Yeah.
It's kind of old news.
Okay.
It makes it sound like it changed a lot of things going forward that we're living with. I mean, so I'm, I kind of looked at that section and I was like, well, why is this in here?
Okay.
Time.
Yeah.
It's 2022. It's almost 2023 now.
Right.
This is like something that happened so long ago. It's nice to have it like as background, like, if it did indeed reduce the potential for affordability, that I think was the absolute opposite of what they were hoping to achieve.
Well, Kathy, if you remember, I think we actually had something to say about that. They wanted to increase affordable housing on the banks of the rivers. So we were looking to put poor people in harm's way, which is environmentally unsound and absolutely unfair to people who have the most to lose if there's a flooding event. So in my opinion, it was an asinine suggestion.
Yeah, I do remember a little bit about that.
And then I don't know what finally happened, but it made no sense. It was actually exacerbating two of our bigger problems, affordable housing and flooding.
You can't, I was reading something about this just recently about affordable housing and what some of the cities are doing. And, it's very, very controversial, and it would be extremely controversial in a community like Mamaroneck, especially one where one of the objectives that you said going in was neighborhood character. But our neighborhoods are mostly single family homes. And you're not getting affordable housing by having single family homes everywhere.
That's why I was wondering how this whole thing about upzoning and ADUs got into the comprehensive plan, because number one, that is extremely controversial. As you probably know, the New York State governor, looked to make a law on that, proposed a law in February. There was a huge outcry all over the state. I mean, just because it's being done in other states doesn't mean it should be done here. I think it's very, very controversial. And it really goes directly against, you keep repeating neighborhood character. Well, ADUs and upzoning is directly contradictory to that, in terms of parking, noise, congestion, loss of green space. That's what upzoning and ADUs means to this village. And my feeling is that it has no place in the comprehensive plan, because it's something that will have to be discussed and, hashed out in the future. I'm just not sure how it got in there in the first place, but, I just don't feel it belongs there for those reasons.
That's a good question, because Neil, maybe you could just talk a little bit about the process, because there were some community meetings and community input. It wasn't just something where the Board of Trustees told you what to do.
Right.
Some parameters, but most comprehensive plans from communities are written by the communities. I mean, they're not written, described, but they're developed with a lot of community input. Now, I was at two of the meetings back in 2018, I think, which I don't really recall very well. But
neither do
I don't recall anything that happened last week or even but how much of what we're looking at now was input from the community, or I don't, or what? Where did it?
So you'll get.
Is it just from previous comprehensive plans?
No, it's not
from comprehensive plan, because it never gets implemented.
No, it wasn't from previous comprehensive plans, but I mean, I have the same issue. It's 2018. We did workshops. I would have to go back to the roster of all the meetings we had for this, but I think we generally, from the public, from residents, we often get the general topic: affordable. We need more affordable housing. We need more. We want more bike lanes, or we want safer street crossings. And then, as a consultant, we tried to parse out, okay, so what are the means towards doing that? I would say, going to the issue of affordable ADUs, I don't see that as an affordable housing strategy that's workable in a lot of places as it is now. Maybe it works in other parts of the West Coast, but I would say ADUs is, at the time, that was a hot issue, and there was a lot of interest among people, ADUs, but it just sounds very simple to say, okay, we can just build accessory dwelling units and make it happen. But that's very, very difficult as a strategy. That's something as a long-term thing. Yes, it can help provide family, younger people, sons and daughters who want to move out and that sort of thing. So that. So that's the gist of the feedback is often that we receive from the public is more general in nature, the general kind of ambition, aspiration, and then our job is to kind of bring into it more specificity. And so what are the different ways that make sense for Mamaroneck to act to make their crossings, their streets safer for people? What are the ways? And that's generally how most public engagement, when we do a lot of meetings with residents, we get. Now there are people who often are from the boards, we get much more detailed feedback. Obviously that's a big part of what I did, and what I'm doing now is revisiting my meetings with reconnecting with all of the committees that I worked very closely with the Committee of the Environment last time, the tree committee, and so I've re-engaged the tree committee, the CFTE, the flood mitigation committee, because they're really the ones that are taking things to a second and third level into, okay, going from, okay, we want to be more sustainable to, okay, what are we going to be doing to be more sustainable? And you can see how the Committee of the Environment has run through many different things, from food waste, that sort of thing. So that's generally how, that's generally the approach. I think the committees, that here they're very strong, and so that's what I'm doing now. I'm revisiting all of the committees, talking with all of them, and the planning board. Yeah, the planning board they had a review role. I never met with them in person as part of the comprehensive plan process for whatever reason. They certainly had a review chance to. They reviewed all the drafts, and I took comments and such. But I think to have a more upfront role in the planning board is good.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, and I did find a couple of emails, Greg would send us things.
Right.
But there was no organized effort for the members of the planning board to participate. It was sort of like, oh, there's a meeting. And so the then chair would go, and I went to a couple, but no one else went, and there was no review. I had chapters printed out that Greg gave us with the notes, said, please read this, but there was no, please read this by this date and give comments. It was, oh, here, read this.
Right.
We're gonna do it a little differently, but I'm still struggling sort of with how rewrite is this going to be? Like, are we, I'm not going to give you comments that, the census data, there's 20 census data now, or there's updated data on this and updated data on that.
We are actually updating all the data in section 3 especially, but go ahead, continue.
I just have my notes on, I just printed out the table of contents, so I have some notes on the table of contents.
Right.
The Hampshire project was pending then. The Hampshire project sort of came, and we made a decision, and now we're in lawsuits.
Yeah, right.
Army Corps of Engineers, that information all has to be updated. So if you're going to update everything, then we'll look at concepts and sort of like the future considerations and the list of things to do. You said the character districts, which is a term that I think is very descriptive, but I never heard it before. Budgets in here, what the capital budget in the village of Mamaroneck is. It's not a real budget. It's just a list of all the projects that people have asked for.
Right.
It
was inserted in kind of after the fact.
No hope of funding. So.
Yeah, they're not funded. It's just whatever gets in first. That's what they do. Whoever can move. So I wouldn't call it the capital budget, but it's just a list of capital projects that are possible. But again, dated. They're outdated. A lot of it. Right.
So my challenge, one of my challenges, I know. So some folks in the board of trustees said, we were very close to being done in 2020. We had a full draft final, that had been reviewed. That was the first draft was reviewed, and the second. So this is the outcome of 2 reviews, and so we were indeed close, but everything changed. And so the challenge here is that there may be. I know the board of trustees is eager to complete this, but at the same time, this is a bit, as you see, there's so much in there that is different, that has changed. I think to be more specific for your role, one thing I'd like to learn about because obviously you are on the, you're the ones who are receiving applications. You're the one who see what's
on
coming
the front
in
lines.
on the on the front lines, and that's so I would like to definitely, I want obviously the comprehensive plan to be a place where if there's certain challenges that the board is having or things the board is seeing constantly, that whether it's positive or negative, that needs to be treated in some way or shape or form through zoning or other measures. That's something I would like to know about. I would like to know what you as on the front line are coming across, and what challenges you have that a comprehensive plan policy could help provide direction for, or some sort of changes, recommendations for changes for. That's one thing. I think the concept of character district, I'd say we're not. What you said about the moratorium study, that's good to know in terms of that it happened. That's what happened, and I think part of what I probably will do in this update is there's a lot of explanatory material in the front of some of these chapters, and I probably want to just make some of these chapters more succinct. In sustainability, there's a whole couple of pages and pages with a couple of front pages, which I think could go in an appendix, and so things get straight to the point. I think your comment about the moratorium study is interesting, because it happened, and I think it's a great record of what happened, but that's what it is now, and there's no need to devote so many pages towards describing those changes. At the time, maybe there was in 2020, but now it's 20.
Yeah, it was new.
4 years, 4 years later.
Yeah, the whole context is different. In the old days, when we talked about affordable housing, which really meant was subsidized or low income housing. And now the term affordable housing extends well into the middle class.
Oh,
and
without a doubt.
That's a real issue. So
Especially in Westchester.
economics has played a big part in
There was a big
changing
article.
the context.
Right.
There's a big article in the local paper recently, just I think over the last weekend, about the lack of affordable housing in Westchester and how bad it is, and we all know it's bad. I mean, that's why you have living in basement apartments that got flooded,
Right.
And that's why you have the people who, as Cindy mentioned, who have the least losing the most whenever there's a flood, because that's where the quote affordable housing is.
Right.
Well, look at the application we just considered. They couldn't afford to do affordable housing.
Right.
They're
building, they have an application to build in the flood zone. It's very expensive to mitigate all of the flood, things, and they can't afford to put an affordable unit in there.
Yeah.
The cost of construction in this area.
Right.
Things they have to do.
Right. And that's the big conundrum, is all the macro things, cost of construction, cost of materials. I mean, it's impossible. It's really impossible. And so that's why I think the retaining strategies becomes very critical. How do you keep what you have is one important thing, one important part of it.
Right. But how do you make it safer for people so that as climate change happens and the flooding gets worse, people are still not even in their homes where they were.
Right.
Yeah, and the worst flooding was in like the basement apartments. So if we're gonna look at, people like putting more people living in their basements, that was the most dangerous place during the flood.
I mean, in Queens, a lot of people died in those.
People died.
Yeah.
But not in Mamaroneck. Everybody got out. But I mean,
thank goodness.
We lost everything, and just right back. I mean, I spoke to someone I know, and he just recently moved right back into the same place. So the time it floods, he's going to lose everything again. So,
I mean, also just the comments on kind of the patterns that everyone's going to the city. I mean, those obviously, as you know, are outdated.
People are working from home.
It's not that way anymore in the last few years. I'm sure.
And the population shifts even just since the pandemic. My neighborhood is just a bunch of young families and little kids.
Yeah.
The housing prices would, are so high that people tried to cash out or cashed out. Now it's starting to come down a little bit again, but everything's sort of changed.
Yeah.
It sounds like a difficult job what you have to do.
Oh yeah, this is definitely it's almost easier to start a new comp plan.
It would be easier. It would certainly be easier to start over. I absolutely agree with you.
In some ways.
Kathy, I think Dennis has his hand up.
Oh, Dennis, you want to say something? Feel free to just jump right in.
Yeah, you guys are great, and I didn't want to jump in too early. So thank you. So with any new construction in a flood zone, right, we have to elevate the living area. So that's always something to keep in mind. I feel bad for the security guard or the concierge that's going to be in one of these buildings, because he's going to get hit with the floodwater first and probably ring that bell and let everybody know. But all the residents that are going to reside in the structure would have to be raised above the base flood elevation. So, even if something is constructed, it's always the worst case scenario for the majority of newer projects they're looking at. So, affordable housing is not for the faint of heart, and sometimes it will obstruct people's views and cram as many places and apartments in one spot as possible. But there are multiple places in the village that I feel, so I'm not against building, just being real open here. There are places that things can be built, and there are some properties that have reached a state of needed repair, but not yet at the point where the building department can close a property. But I think there's a lot of property owners that could be approached in moving in direction of expanding their property and becoming affordable housing. And perhaps if you want, I can facilitate this to a degree and point you guys in the right direction if you want. But utilize me so I can aid you or assist you to get to where you feel comfortable, or what properties or areas that you're thinking about, or the lack of not knowing where these properties are. I can help you out. All right.
That's where I think, when I look back at the work we did for the moratorium study, we essentially did a build out analysis, but it wasn't a build out analysis based on theoretical, like, okay, this is what the zoning says, so this is what it's going to be. It was based on a study understanding of the value of the current value of the property. And so it was based on really identifying those properties that have susceptibility, financial incentive to redevelop, and based on the zoning, what could be built there. And there are a number of properties on the map that I think it's on page, let's see, it's in section 6. It's on page 102 of the comp plan. It shows, what are existing properties that could be redeveloped as apartments. And, that was analysis done long ago. So to me, that provides some sort of general insight into what are some places. But of course, I think, Dennis, you're saying, I think at least I would be interested in learning and, getting more of thinking on what you believe are areas that there are possibilities.
Not feasible until you change the zoning.
Yeah, but that would be the recommendation then in the comp plan to make the zoning changes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real conflict between single family home zoning and multifamily home zoning. But I remember when John Verney was chair, I forget what the project was, but he and I were chatting, and I said, on the Post Road, why can't we have a 3-story building with a store on the ground floor and 2 affordable apartments on top? And the zoning didn't permit it, but it just seemed so obvious.
Well, they changed the zoning on the Post Road.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
but let's
that's
face
the thing.
There's not a lot of storefronts needed these days.
Right.
That's right.
That's true too.
Right. So,
yeah, but then you get a food desert, and you're begging, a grocery store to come in to service the community, I mean, you start unintended consequences.
That's right. That's why you have to do a comp plan.
But look how long it took them to get North Shore Farms to come in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That was a tough one.
And they got flooded.
Board, I completely agree with you. That's what it comes down to. A lot of communities is that the community itself has to start soliciting markets, groceries to come back in, and that's hard. It's very difficult.
A lot of communities have economic development people.
Yeah, and without changing the zoning, right? And putting a strain on the zoning board and use the planning board. If individual properties come up, they can apply for a variance for the individual properties instead of changing the zoning map entirely. And I'm good with single family homes. I like single family homes. I very seldom, within reason, to add a mother-daughter, but that's always skeptical because that changes the whole dynamic. As soon as the inspector walks out the door, anything can happen. So, single, two family, that's fine. I mean, our R7, that's a possibility. And going back to the original thing of the locations, a lot of the properties that flood that are still in disrepair, that are in the two family and multi-resident zonings that exist currently is still opportune to develop that to a degree, to squeeze out a couple more apartments. So, maybe starting small may be the direction to go in. And that's it. I'm good.
All right, it's getting really late, guys. Board members, do you feel like you have enough information to review this and have some cogent and coherent comments for Neil by the end of, or by the next meeting, which is 2 from today?
So coherent is in the eyes of the beholder, but.
Well, I mean, this gives me some thought also, maybe just having this meeting, let me see if I can also come back with some specific bullets that maybe a little bit more guided, that will be more, I think some more specificity would probably be helpful.
Okay. You can communicate with Brittany by email and
sure,
disseminate to the planning board, or you can get us all at
.org.
No,
VOMNY.org.
It's VOMNY.net, isn't it, for the email address?
.org.
I think the one for the group is org, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, the one for the group is org. For individual people, it's .net. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think because that was my initial thing was let me give each committee a series of questions, but I think with this group, let me just
great.
digest what we heard talked about.
I don't feel like you wasted your time tonight. Then this I think was very helpful.
No, I mean this
could go on for hours.
That I'm thankful that we didn't go on for hours, but
I'm sorry it was so late. Yeah.
No, I mean this brings back memories of my planning board days back as a consultant.
I hope they were pleasant memories.
They were good. I learned a lot being a planning board consultant back in the day. So, but yeah, I'll also put some thinking in so that I can try to provide you with some more pointed guidance and maybe more specific questions too, as well, that you might answer while you're reviewing. I think, specifically chapters 5 and 6.
It's helpful for us to know that you're really looking at 2 chapters. We don't necessarily have to read.
Right. Feel free to read anything.
That doesn't mean you all can't if you don't want. If you want, I mean, we can focus on those 2, but if you have comments on the others, feel free. And it would be good if we. 27th, the meeting on the 27th, to have written comments then, so Ashley can compile them. That would be good. So we can have a discussion, but but we won't have a meeting again till September. So she'll have to take what we discuss and what we've written and put it together in a coherent way.
Do we?
That seems to be the word of the night. Yes.
Do we know that we'll be doing that meeting on Zoom yet? That next one?
The governor's order expires tomorrow.
So we don't know.
We could do hybrid, but last time the order expired, she extended it on the very day it expired. So stay tuned.
Yep.
Change her mind or do something tomorrow.
Okay.
Not, it has to be in person with the majority of the board members in person. So we'll see. And then if anybody's hybrid or anybody's remote, they have to indicate their location on the notice. So, and open their location for the public.
No.
So if you want to stay home, but I personally will not be in New York that evening. I will probably be sitting in the same chair, but I am 325 miles away, so I'm not sure somebody's going to actually come and visit me and sit next to me here in this chair.
We'll come sit with you.
Maybe, yeah, maybe I will. It looks pretty nice out the window with the
I
sunset.
tried, you know, I had a nice lake back there, and there is a supermoon tonight. Over the lake.
Oh, wow.
There
Wow.
it is.
Wow.
Right. I was trying to get the camera so you could see the supermoon rise. Oh, yeah, so I didn't know if you got to see it.
It's been a nice
But,
view.
yeah.
It's been a nice view back there.
Tonight's the night of the full moon, and it was
Looked lovely.
but it was a lovely, lovely moonrise yesterday. I did get a picture of it. Today I was busy. But yeah, so I won't be there, but we have one new application. I think, Brittany, we might get now Van Rance back and for the next time, and anything else that might pop up that we get on the agenda. But right now we have just one new application. And it doesn't sound like Orienta is going to be back in time. So we'll have time to spend on this, hopefully. All right, everybody. Thank you. It's very late. I mean, we need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
I need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night. Thank you, Alicia. Dennis,
Good night. Good night, everybody.
Brittany, for
Yeah.
staying here late. Okay.
Thank you.
We know
Thank
it
you.
too.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.